dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
This is GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys, live here from the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham, and this is our immigration special, because coming up, no Channel migrants will be allowed to stay in Britain. That's the big news from the new Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. We'll be taking her speech live during this show. She's expected to pledge to crack down on the numbers of illegal migrants entering the UK, and a lot of speculation is brewing that she's going to pull us out of the ECHR and all that guff and end the influence of foreign judges on our own immigration policy. But how on earth will this happen? We'll bring you her speech live at around 5 o'clock. I've got an exclusive on migrant hotels to bring you as well. We appear to be the only channel still banging on about that. That'll be in a few minutes' time. I'm asking all the big immigration questions that you, the people, want answered. Is the amount of legal immigration a bit too high as well? Is integration working? I've got a raft of MPs and experts lined up for all of those people who are concerned. And indeed, we are going to be talking to concerned residents on the Kent coast. Our immigration special is not going to be one to miss, but there are some other big topics in town as well that we couldn't avoid for you. Is another Truss U-turn in sight? Should benefits go up in line with inflation? Are people scrounging off the state or in need of desperate help? That's one of the big questions. More Tory infighting over whether or not universal credit hikes should match inflation, or should the government just cut spending? We've got a Kwasi exclusive as well, and the latest on the COVID inquiry, and much, much more. Get in touch and let me know what you think. Our big question today, of course, for you at home, listening in your car, watching us online, whatever you're doing, and what is our immigration special is, should no Channel migrants be allowed to stay in Britain? Pretty simple stuff, but I want to hear from you. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But before we get started, let's have a crack at the latest headlines.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 3 minutes past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The Chancellor's exclusively told us that his medium-term fiscal plan will not be brought forward, and it'll be delivered as planned at the end of November. Kwasi under pressure to give more details on how he'll reduce the country's debt. It follows real turmoil in the markets, which saw sterling plummet after the mini-budget he announced 11 days ago.
We reversed this whole cycle of a 70-year high tax take. You will know the figures. I mean, the IMF were predicting the lowest growth rate of the G7. We had the highest tax take in 70 years. And the path we were on was unsustainable.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's told GB News she'll look at all options to address illegal Channel crossings, including deals beyond Rwanda. She was also asked if she'd describe the situation as a crisis.
The label crisis that's not the point. The point is it shouldn't be happening, and we're going to stop it happening.
Are you going to do more deals beyond Rwanda, do you think?
I do want to look at more deals beyond Rwanda. I also want to make the Rwanda policy work by making sure we can control our own laws and we can't be overruled by the ECHR.
This afternoon, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, will tell the Conservative Party conference she's considering new laws to make it easier to deport people who come to the UK illegally. She's expected to say that she'll, quote, allow immigration that grows the economy, but will end abuse of the rules. She's also anticipated to ask France to do more to stop illegal boats crossing the Channel. Several train companies reported a glitch this morning, preventing customers buying tickets with their bank cards. Customers at Greater Anglia and Northern have been unable to buy tickets on the company's apps or websites, and South Eastern have said there are problems buying tickets in person at stations too. All three operators say they're investigating and looking to fix the issue as soon as possible. The family of Chris Kaba, who was shot by police in South London, are calling for an urgent decision on whether the officers involved will face criminal charges. It comes as the inquest into his death was opened and adjourned to allow the police to watchdog to investigate. The 24-year-old was killed after a police car chase last month. Kaba was unarmed. The IOPC says its investigation is expected to last 6 to 9 months. Rebecca Vardy's been ordered to pay £1.5 million towards Colleen Rooney's legal costs after losing a High Court battle. Ms Vardy sued for libel after Ms Rooney accused her of leaking posts from her private Instagram account to the Sun newspaper. Disney Plus is planning to create a documentary series with Colleen Rooney about the dispute. Ex-Formula One boss Bernie Ecclestone faces trial in October next year on fraud charges. The 91-year-old's accused of failing to declare more than £400 million in a trust in Singapore to the government. Mr Ecclestone was not asked to enter a plea at Southwark Crown Court earlier. He's previously indicated he would plead not guilty. North Korea has fired a ballistic missile over Japan for the first time in 5 years. Sirens started in northern Japan and citizens were ordered to take cover and some transport was suspended. The launch is Pyongyang's 5th in 10 days. Japan's Prime Minister described the attack as barbaric.
North Korea has fired a ballistic missile. It flew over our country and we believe it fell in the Pacific Ocean. It's another barbaric action again after the repeated ballistic missile launches, and we strongly condemn this.
Ukrainian forces have made their most significant gains in the south of the country since the war began, seizing back more territory in areas annexed by Russia. The breakthrough in the south mirrors recent advances in the east, despite Russia ordering the mobilisation of 300,000 troops and threatening nuclear retaliation. Meanwhile, Russian lawyers say they are overwhelmed by requests for help from those at risk of being sent to fight in Ukraine. The Prince of Wales will deliver his first speech today since he gained his new title. Prince William will be at the Science Museum in London to address the United Wildlife's Global Summit. Well, he helped found the organisation with the aim of protecting endangered species from the illegal wildlife trade. His speech will highlight the damage caused by wildlife crime and the impact on biodiversity and local communities. You're now up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Patrick.
Welcome to the GB News Immigration Special live here from Tory Party Conference in Birmingham as we wait to hear live from the new Home Secretary. 60,000, that's the number of people predicted to cross the Channel in dinghies by the end of this year. 240,000, that's the number of net migration into the UK in 2021. You add just those two numbers together and you got the population of Milton Keynes and then some. And that's before we talk about additional illegal immigrants. Priti Patel turned out to be pretty useless. Relying on the French to solve our Channel crossing crisis is like relying on a chocolate fireguard to hold back a towering inferno. Why on earth are foreign judges from San Marino, Bosnia, Azerbaijan and Moldova to have a final say over our deportations? It's clearly madness. We are the People's Channel, and frankly, people are pretty concerned about what's going on in the Channel. But what can we actually do about it? Will Braverman be brave, or will she cave? She's talking live here on GB News very, very shortly, and we hear a lot about human rights, don't we? But what about the human rights of people living right here in Britain with public services stretched to the max, a housing crisis and a cost of living crisis as well? It's time to bring us solutions, not more problems. Our new Home Sec will speak shortly, but we've heard it all come and go before, and while Home Secretaries come and go, illegal immigrants do just keep coming. So, ahead of Suella Braverman's landmark speech, I decided to ask people right here at Tory Party Conference what they wanted done in the Channel and, frankly, what they thought was best for Britain.
To be a strong policy. You look at Poland, what a prime example, that knew how to defend its borders from illegal migration. If you want to be a legal migrant, like the Ukrainians now who are suffering, escaping, they can come, apply, and they're very welcomed to Poland. And those illegals who tried to force their way through Belarus, they were just simply turned back.
The whole country is tired of this situation with illegal immigrants entering the country. We cannot tolerate this any longer. It's costing a lot of money. They are illegal immigrants, the criminals. We must return these people to wherever they came from.
It's probably much more complicated than most of your commentators and the viewers think.
Okay. Well, so do you think there is anything that we can do, or should we just?
Well, there's lots of things we can do, but none of them are simple. And I think the simple solutions are almost certainly the wrong ones.
We need to deal with the criminal gangs that are bringing people here, because actually, unless we solve that problem, we're not going to solve it all. So I think the government's been trying to do that with the Rwanda scheme, which I would support, but which is controversial. But ultimately, we've got to deal with the root cause of it, and we've got to work with the French, I think, as well.
As a nation, we should provide support to people. Refugees, economic migrants are two very different things, though. So if it's an economic migrant, it's a different story, and they should provide something for the country. Refugees, on the other hand, we should be looking to support, that get them up on their feet, and then turn hopefully into something that will, build up the economy. And
OK, well, you've heard now from the people here at Conservative Party conference, and their promises might just be answered as in, just under about 2 hours' time. We will hear from the new Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, as she sets out her plans to tackle illegal immigration into the UK. But in one of her first major speeches, she is expected to tell Conservative Party members right here in Birmingham that the government will prevent human rights laws from interfering in the UK's ability to deport illegal migrants. Almost 40,000 people have crossed the Channel so far this year, with around 60% of those coming from Albania. But is Braverman's hard line yet another promise that the government won't be able to fulfil due to some kind of, I don't know, mainstream media or whatever kind of backlash? Well, we'll bring you the Home Secretary's speech live here on GB News Live, very appropriately named, I think you can all agree. But first, I wanted to speak to the leader of the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead Council. Why, you may ask? Well, it's a Conservative council, of course it is, and they've had massive issues when it's come to those migrant hotels, which we here as a channel will not be dropping. It's Andrew Johnson. Andrew, thank you very much. Really appreciate you making the time for us here. Just to clarify for people then, you had migrant hotels essentially forced on you, did you?
Absolutely. We've got 2 migrant hotels, both imposed on us by the Home Office with potentially zero consultation. Absolutely no engagement before it happened, very little follow-up. And we've got 500 people now accommodated within Windsor and Maidenhead who really, in all honesty, are not located in the most appropriate locations. OK,
and the vast majority is, as far as you're aware, are they coming across the Channel, or is there just no way of knowing?
There's little way of knowing, but from the assumptions we've made, the majority are those crossing the Channel.
OK, and what do you want Suella Braverman to say? Because we understand that potentially her speech today is going to focus on what's going on in the Channel.
Yeah, absolutely. There's several things to me, but what I want to see is a bold plan, a decisive plan, and actually a plan the government's going to stick to. I mean, it's all very well to try and stem the flow of people crossing the Channel, but we've got to have a clear plan of what we do with those people who are already here. Those people, for example, who are already in hotels in places such as Datchet, within Maidenhead, that's now starting to squeeze out the local tourist economy, and actually now starting to have significant cost increases, not only for my council, but for every council from Windsor right through to West Cumbria. Every council in England is now having to deal with this crisis. And do we think it's fair? No, we don't, actually. That's all.
And it's worth noting as well that one of the major MPs in your area is Theresa May, former Home Secretary herself, former Prime Minister, of course, and I imagine, and we're going to hear now, in fact, from Priti Patel, who spoke this time last year, OK, at the Tory party conference, and I imagine that you're a bit sick and tired of people talking tough and not doing anything. Here's what Priti Patel had to say last year.
I make no apology for securing our borders and exploring all possible options to save lives by ending these horrific journeys, which is why, right from the start, Boris and I have worked intensively with every institution with the responsibility to protect our borders. Border Force, the police, the National Crime Agency, maritime experts, and yes, the military, to deliver operational solutions. including new sea tactics, which we are working to implement to turn back the boats.
Priti Patel there, Priti Patel talking tough, but Andrew Johnson, as the leader of a Conservative council in the Royal Borough, do you have faith that this Conservative government, that this Conservative Home Secretary will actually have conviction in what she says?
I think we've probably got to give the new Home Secretary time to establish her credentials and her track record. But what I would say is, what I would plea for is at the same time as trying to stem the crossings, people crossing the channel illegally generally, give councils more support to deal with those people already here, because at the moment it's costing us a lot of money, and that cost is being picked up by local taxpayers, and that just simply isn't fair given all of the cost pressures that we have to deal with in adult services, children's services, school places. We're on the front line of this, and we need some support, quite honestly.
Give us some idea of the impact that it's had on you guys, because any local council anywhere in the country, especially with a cost of living crisis, a housing crisis, issues with public services, you were already stretched, and then you get this landed on you as well.
We were stretched to breaking point, to be honest, and we're now seeing additional costs in the region of, for Windsor and Maidenhead, £500,000. We've got to find new school places, we've got to put on school transport. There's entire issues around antisocial behaviour and policing that we've now got to look into, but fundamentally for us, Patrick, it's about the Home Office taking over these hotels, and a lot of them just ain't in the right location. They haven't got the support services, and actually it's not fair on the people that are being housed there as well. It's people dumping, for want of a better word.
People dumping is, frankly, I think most people would agree exactly what it is. And we had a show yesterday almost entirely devoted to a U-turn, okay, which was a tax cut U-turn. And that, yes, there was ructions here from party members, some MPs, but the vast majority of it came from, I would argue, the mainstream media, potentially. Are you concerned now that this particular government could back down, could U-turn on a strong announcement today that we're expecting from Suella Braverman, because there's a bit of public backlash?
If a government really wants this policy to work and really wants to be seen as decisive, it's got to stay the course on this, Patrick. It's absolutely vital that not only do we reduce the numbers, we also deal with those here already here. I mean, it's costing the taxpayer £4 million a day to house people in hotels across England. That's unsustainable. But it's also, as I say, it's people dumping, and it's putting massive pressure on existing local services.
Just lastly, very quickly, sorry, we're a bit pressed for time here now, but in terms of Suella Braverman actually being able to pull this off, if indeed she announces what we're expecting her to announce, which is that no channel migrant will be allowed to stay in Britain, we're going to have to ditch the influence of foreign courts and, frankly, some foreign rules and regs, I suppose, aren't we?
I think that's absolutely vital, and we've got to treat it with the same urgency we've taken bold action on tackling the rising cost in energy. It's the same urgency, it really is.
Andrew Johnson, thank you very, very much. Always appreciate your time. Leader of the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. I should get that right. So, no, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. What do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Don't be shy. Get in touch. It's a big issue, this, for you. And today's the day for it. It's an immigration special right here on GB News as we await to bring you live the speech from the new Home Secretary. But another area that's been directly impacted by the number of migrants crossing the Channel is Lydd in Kent, and Kim Rye lives there and has been filming small boats making their way onto local beaches. Kim, thank you very much. Great to have you back on the programme, actually. It's been a little while since I've spoken to you. Now, you can see these migrants arriving on the beaches near you, can't you? And what's that situation been like recently?
Good afternoon. Well, there was a landing yesterday, 100 of them. 100 people on two boatloads of 100 people. There was some kind of shenanigan going on in the Channel where they were being swapped from one boat to another. The whole thing is a complete mess. We've got very few people on the beaches when they're coming in. We've got very few personnel down there. Sometimes those of us who film it and other people down there, dog walkers, etc. We've got loads of people coming up the beach and only 2 police officers sometimes. So the security is just not there. There are 2 things that came up in the conversation that you've just had. One of them is refugees. No one coming from France is a refugee because France is not at war. And the other thing is the ECHR. The ECHR, let's put it this way. Sweden is an EU country. Hungary is an EU country. Viktor Orban has closed the borders long ago of Hungary. He won't put up with it. And Sweden now are taking action against this. and they are subject to the ECHR. So how come they can get round that and we can't? That's what I'd like Suella Braverman to explain to me.
Yeah, but I need to know from you, as a resident, as a normal person, we are the People's Channel. We love to hear from people like you. Do you have faith, or are you now a little bit sick and tired of empty words?
I go by the old maxim, I'll believe it when I see it. Because I didn't believe that the Rwanda plan would work, and it didn't, and it won't. I want to give her the benefit of the doubt with this one, though. I'd like to think that it's going to work, but I'm not holding my breath. It's as simple as that.
Kim, short and sweet, but we really appreciate that. It was punchy. Kim Rye there, Lyd resident in Kent. And that, I suspect, will be the general tone going forward of people wanting to give this a crack. If you're just joining us, Suella Braverman, the new Home Secretary, will be speaking live here on GB News in about an hour and a half time, roughly. So we're previewing that here. Give it a bit of time. Her announcement is supposed to be, anyway, as we understand it, that no channel migrant who arrives in the UK will be allowed to stay, but lots of practicalities involved in this. How does this happen? We saw what happened with Rwanda. Will it get blocked by foreign judges in foreign courts yet again? There's human rights lawyers. Yes, okay, lots of money in this apparently. But let's go live now. GB News' reporter Ellie Costello, who's in Clacton-on-Sea for us. Ellie, thank you very, very much. Great to have you here joining me live at Conservative Party conference. So what are people saying there about the numbers of people coming across the channel?
Well, good afternoon, Patrick. Well, this is a huge issue for people living on the coast in the east of England, which is where we are now in Clacton-on-Sea. I was just speaking to a gentleman actually just here on the beach who said that after the cost of living crisis and the energy bills issue, he says the issue of illegal migration is up there. It's number 3 in what matters to him. And I don't think he's alone in people that are living in Clacton. Illegal migration is literally on their doorstep. There are migrants being held in hotels close by. There are incidents of people getting off of lorries in the town centre. This is real for people that live here, and it's something that is part of their day-to-day life. They want to see action. They don't want to see empty words. And it was this time last year at the Conservative Party conference where Priti Patel was speaking about the Rwanda deal, and that has not come into play as of yet. They want people here want to see the issue tackled head on. So high hopes for Suella Braverman's speech later on today. Obviously, our new Home Secretary outlining her plan to tackle illegal migration. And there are whispers that there will be a talk of a blanket ban on channel migrants trying to enter the UK illegally. Very much a lot of support here in Clacton-on-Sea. And this is such a fascinating seat to talk about this, Patrick, because since 2010, when this seat was created, it has been a Tory party seat, apart from 2014 to 2017, when it was the one and only UKIP seat in the country. Now, let's remind ourselves about UKIP's stance towards immigration. They wanted to tackle it head on. They wanted to really limit those numbers of people coming into the UK illegally. So those who voted for UKIP back in 2014 in that by-election when this area swung to UKIP, they will very much be supportive of Suella Braverman's speech, if that is indeed what she outlines this afternoon. They want to see action and they want to see clarity, and they've had enough of what they say are empty words.
Ellie Costello. Ellie, thank you very, very much. Really fascinating report, that, live from the scene there on Clacton-on-Sea, where, frankly, it's those people in those areas there who've been, I suppose you could say, at the coalface of what's been going on in the channel, as we await with bated breath to hear what Suella Braverman, our new Home Secretary, is going to say. Could well be a big announcement, could well be music to a lot of people's ears, especially here at Conservative Party conference. Will she really do it, though? Will she really say that anyone who arrives here across the channel in one of those dinghies will not be allowed to stay? But the news has angered, shock horror, the charity Care for Calais, and their founder, Claire Mosley, had this to say. She said, "This proposal by the new Home Secretary is barbaric, untruthful and unnecessary. The government's rhetoric around people crossing the channel is simply false. There is a mountain of evidence that the vast majority are genuine refugees. This criminalisation of them is blatant victim blaming of incredibly vulnerable people simply for the purpose of grabbing headlines. That is the view of Care for Calais. And it's that kind of contention, ladies and gentlemen, that I think will have us all wondering. We saw a Tory U-turn when it came to those tax cuts for, well, the wealthy, let's be honest. Will there be a U-turn on this as well? This is GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys, from Conservative Party Conference. It is our immigration special, but we've got a few other stories in town as well, because our brilliant business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, has sat down. He's only gone and done it with Kwasi Kwarteng for an exclusive interview following what has been a turbulent, a tough week for our new Chancellor. And I have the pleasure of bringing that to you next. I'll be back in a tick. Don't go anywhere.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good afternoon to you. Coming up to 3:30, I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. Now, the Chancellor's exclusively told us his medium-term fiscal plan will not be brought forward. It will be delivered as originally planned at the end of November. Kwasi Kwarteng's under increasing pressure to give more details on how he'll reduce the country's debt. It follows turmoil on the markets, which saw sterling plummet after the mini-budget was announced by him 11 days ago. The Chancellor's told us decisions have been made at a difficult time.
I think there were things, it was a very quick time that we did it. And also you've got to remember the context. I mean, what was extraordinary about that month was that we had a new government and also we had the sad passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So we had a nation in mourning. And then literally, I think 4 days after the funeral, we had the mini budget. It was high speed, high pressure environment, and we could have got, as David Cameron used to say, prepared the pitch a bit better.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's told GB News she'll look at all options to address illegal channel crossings, including deals beyond Rwanda. She was also asked if she'd describe the situation as a crisis.
The label crisis that's not the point. The point is it shouldn't be happening and we're going to stop it happening.
Are you going to do more deals beyond Rwanda, do you think?
I do want to look at more deals beyond Rwanda. I also want to make the Rwanda policy work by making sure we can control our own laws and we can't be overruled by the ECHR.
A 14-year-old boy is in custody after being arrested on suspicion of killing another 14-year-old boy in Gateshead. Northumbria Police says it found the teenager with injuries consistent with having been caused by a bladed article just after 8 o'clock last night. A 13-year-old girl also remains in custody after being arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. The family of a man who was shot by police in South London are calling for an urgent decision on whether the officers involved will face criminal charges. The inquest into Chris Carber's death has been opened and adjourned to allow the police watchdog to investigate. The 24-year-old was killed after a police car chase last month. He was unarmed. The IOPC says its investigation is expected to last 6 to 9 months. Rebecca Vardy's been ordered to pay £1.5 million towards Colleen Rooney's legal costs after losing a High Court battle. Miss Vardy sued for libel after Miss Rooney accused her of leaking posts from her private Instagram account to the Sun newspaper. The judge from the so-called Wathaker Christie case ruled Miss Vardy should pay 90% of Miss Rooney's legal costs. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Don't go anywhere. We'll shortly be back to Birmingham and Patrick in a moment.
Welcome back to Birmingham, here with me, Patrick Christys, for GB News live from the Conservative Party conference, where soon-ish we're going to be hearing from our new Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, as she outlines potentially some very, very, very bold measures when it comes to tackling illegal immigration, especially what's going on in the Channel. But yes, whilst it's our immigration specialist, not the only story, or indeed Tory, in town, because there does seem to be growing turmoil within the Tory party ranks. Home Secretary Suella Braverman has accused fellow Tory MPs of staging a coup to force the government to drop its plans to get rid of that 45p tax rate for top earners. With inflation soaring, the pound slumping and recession looming, although the pound has kind of risen again, a bit like Christ, it ramps up the pressure on the government to get the UK economy back on track. That means all eyes are now on the Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, and he's been speaking exclusively, big exclusive this, to GB News' economics and business editor, Liam Halligan.
Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, thanks so much for joining us here on GB News. The market reaction to your mini-budget of the 23rd of September was obviously quite dramatic, some would say violent. You're very experienced in financial markets. Did that reaction surprise you?
Well, I think there were lots of things going on. Obviously, the mini-budget itself was bold, and we were focusing on growth and we wanted to reduce taxes. And I think elements of the market may have been surprised at the boldness of the package. But of course there was also a global context. It's very important for viewers to remember that at the beginning of last week the dollar was hitting highs, 20-year highs against the euro, 50-year highs against the yen. The Bank of Japan had to intervene to support the yen, and this is all against the background of the Fed, the US Fed, really pushing up interest rates. So there was a global picture. I don't deny that there was some market reaction to the budget because it was a bold offer.
But the timing of it, the fact that you gave your mini budget and then within 24 hours the pound had fallen quite a lot and then it fell very dramatically on the Monday morning.
That's right.
Doesn't that allow your enemies to paint this mini budget as radical and extreme?
I don't think it was extreme. I think it was very much what we decided to focus on. It was bold. We hadn't done anything like that before.
A bit too bold in retrospect?
Well, we reversed this whole cycle of a 70-year high tax take. You will know the figures. I mean, the IMF were predicting the lowest growth rate of the G7. We had the highest tax take in 70 years. And the path we were on was unsustainable. And I thought that what we should do is actually try and reduce taxes, and that's what we've done. And nobody's arguing that we should put up corporation tax. Nobody's arguing that we shouldn't have reversed the national insurance increase. In fact, Labour have said that they would stick to that. And I think we've shifted the debate. And I'm hopeful that over the next few weeks things will stabilise, but also we'll be able to get growth in this economy and to have incentives. And there were so many other packages, Liam, policies about the enterprise investment scheme, allowing people to invest more in that, the annual investment allowance, sticking to £1 million so that companies can actually get investing and not be...
But what would you have done differently in retrospect, Chancellor? No Chancellor, no Prime Minister, especially when they're incoming, mid-term, if you like, wants to see a market reaction that dramatic. What could you have done differently in retrospect?
Well, I think there were things, it was a very quick time that we did it. And also you've got to remember the context. I mean, what was extraordinary about that month was that we had a new government, and also we had the sad passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So we had a nation in mourning. And then literally, I think 4 days after the funeral, we had the mini budget. It was high speed, high pressure environment. And we could have got, as David Cameron used to say, prepared the pitch a bit better. But what you've got to remember is that 5 weeks ago, we were in the middle of an energy crisis. And the energy intervention actually was the most significant thing that we did as part of the mini budget. That was the bit that I think we showed real leadership about an energy crisis where people were facing £6,500 potentially in their bills next year. And we intervened.
Final question. You've said now that you are going to...
OK, that was Liam Halligan there with Kwasi Kwarteng, the Chancellor, but we're going to have to go live now to the London Science Museum, where Prince William is speaking.
You being here is a testament to how far United for Wildlife has grown. Our natural world is one of our greatest assets. It is a lesson I learned from a young age from my father and my grandfather, both committed naturalists in their own right, and also from my much-missed grandmother, who cared so much for the natural world. In times of loss, it is a comfort to honour those we miss through the work we do. And I take great comfort then from the progress we're making to end the illegal wildlife trade. 8 years ago, we set out to develop a solution to one of the largest, yet often overlooked, international crimes blighting our world. A crime that robs us all of our most precious natural resources and funds organised crime, the harms of which are often directly felt by the most vulnerable communities. And a crime that this year felt especially brutal. The devastating news about Ranger Anton Mzimba is shocking confirmation of how vicious the illegal wildlife trade is. Anton dedicated himself to the protection of wildlife, undertaking his role diligently and professionally, despite threats to his life. He stood up to violent criminals and paid the ultimate price. It is only right that we pay tribute to him and all the other selfless rangers and frontline conservationists here today. And it is also only right that we honour him by continuing our work with renewed focus and vigour. It is, of course, a difficult mission that we commit ourselves to. The challenges often cited in fighting wildlife crime include the lack of a coordinated international response, the lack of strong criminal justice, corruption and insufficient resources. But we set out to reverse that. We set out to ensure that those involved in wildlife crime face an international response as powerful and coordinated as any other serious and organised crime. To bring their sinister operations out of the shadows and to ensure that communities are equipped, empowered and supported to protect themselves and their natural world. And everyone here is playing a significant role in helping us do that. In the 6 years since creating our international transport and financial task forces, we have brought together over 250 enforcement agencies, transport companies, financial institutions and other corporations in the shared commitment to combat the illegal wildlife trade. We have contributed to over 450 law enforcement cases, over 250 arrests, almost 200 seizures of wildlife products, and we have helped to train over 100,000 people. We only have to look back to August to find examples of this work paying off, when Muazu Kroma was sentenced to over 5 years in prison for conspiring to traffic more than $7 million worth of rhino horn and elephant ivory, involving the illegal poaching of around 135 animals. US authorities led the way in this case, but critical to its success was the collaboration of a broad range of organisations across multiple continents. United for Wildlife members were among them, assisting with a landmark case that sent a clear message to the criminal gangs facilitating wildlife trafficking. You will face serious consequences. Our work is far from complete, and there's so much more still to be done. But there is cause for optimism. This year, Colombia became the first country to sign our Buckingham Palace Declaration, reflecting the importance they placed on wildlife conservation and protection. I invite more to join them. The International Maritime Organization created its first ever guidelines.
OK, that is Prince William there, who is continuing to speak at the London Science Museum about wildlife. But we're going to move away from that now and get back into what some of you lovely people think. GBviews at gbnews.uk. I've been asking you to get in touch ahead of Suella Braverman's big announcement in about an hour and 15-ish time here at Conservative Party Conference in Birmingham on, well, illegal immigration, potentially some stuff about immigration in general, but definitely what's going on in the channel as we understand it. Sonny's been in touch. Sonny says, this new illegal policy should have been implemented years ago. Hopefully it means a policy about illegal immigrants and not an illegal policy, but there we go. It must be backdated a minimum of 5 years if your claim for asylum has not been granted. It's strong stuff from Sonny. Jilly says, all channel migrants should be immediately deported. If they have no passport or papers, they go back to France. Slight issue there. The French. Anyway, Jan says, anyone without paperwork should not be allowed to stay. A genuine refugee would keep hold of paperwork as it would prove their right to asylum. I think we've got time for one more. Dan says, we need actions, not words. Dan, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Our viewers will be able to see a picture of the stage where Suella Braverman will be talking from very, very shortly, which just appeared. And on that stage, but also similar stages, we have heard a lot of strong words from Home Secretaries in the past about how they're going to deal with what's going on in the channel, illegal immigration in general, immigration in general, and not a lot of action, some would say. Dan finishes by saying, we've had far too many words. There we go, Dan, which is a good point, I think, for you to end it. So we are going to be listening live, taking live, watching live Home Secretary Suella Braverman's speech. From that very stage, the atmosphere is building here in Birmingham at the Conservative Party Conference. Rail strikes not putting too many people off just yet, but moving on from that for the second, Jacob Rees-Mogg has announced that the UK's first nuclear fusion plant will be built in Nottinghamshire. And speaking at the Conservative Party Conference yesterday, the Business and Energy Secretary claimed the power plant could be contributing to the grid by 2040, with the promise, of course, of domestic nuclear fusion remains largely theoretical, but Mr Rees-Mogg is optimistic, stating that the groundbreaking project would be a beacon of bountiful green energy. Well, the leader of Nottinghamshire County Council, easy for me to say, an MP for Mansfield, Ben Bradley, joins me now. Ben, thank you very, very much. We gave you a little bit of a long stand there because we had a few other bits and bobs going on, so appreciate you sticking around for us. Just talk to me a bit about what exactly this means, really, because is it pie in the sky or is it actually going to happen?
Well, it's really interesting technology. We know that it works. Fusion is the thing that powers the sun and the stars, right? We can see it, it's there. What we're trying to do is make it on a commercial scale. So we managed to get power into the grid through fusion in Oxfordshire not too long ago, a few months ago. If we can scale it up to something that we can replicate, a power plant that works, we can replicate, sell it around the world. We could export energy around the world. It's a source of limitless clean energy if we can do it, which is, it's a game changer for net zero and all of those. And doing that in a way that meets with the government's growth target, right? This is massive infrastructure investment. This comes with jobs and skills, infrastructure, huge billions of pounds investment in North Nottinghamshire. So a game changer for our economy too.
And can I ask, was this almost like a British invention? nuclear fusion or not? I mean, I get that. Is that a big question? Is that a stupid question? Forgive me, I'm a bit of a dunce.
I can't go that too far on it, but I know most recently, as I say, we managed to make that theoretical "this is what the sun does" into actually being able to power electrical equipment in Oxfordshire very recently. So we are world leading in this technology. There's not really a sector in the UK because it's very new, but the joy is, from that perspective, that it's all inward investment because it's around the world in research and nuclear innovation. That's all sorts of investment from all over the world coming here to the UK.
Right, does it keep the eco-mob happy?
It should do, but it should do it in a way that doesn't make us all poor.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
OK, so we won't end up sleeping on beds of moss in caves wearing loincloths?
No, we should end up with clean energy that allows us to keep the lights on in a cheaper, greener way.
OK, that's nice. OK, so there shouldn't be too many protests, and presumably as well it will really benefit the local area, one would have thought. Just as well as the world, that will see a hub there. That's levelling up, is it?
It's huge. It's international news, right? Because if you can replicate it, you can sell it, we can export that around the world. But it's also huge for levelling up. It's been, we've been trying for a long time to get it into what is a very disadvantaged former coalfield working class community. Thousands of skilled jobs in advanced manufacturing, nuclear science. We've got a big devolution deal as well that allows us to build the skills pipeline, the career paths for young people who haven't had opportunities like that on their doorstep for decades and generations. So it's massive.
And are you really hoping beyond hope there's not going to be some kind of U-turn on this? Because yesterday, my entire U-turn was a phrase previously I only saw when I got a fine by Sadiq Khan in London, right? But please tell me this isn't going to be a U-turn as well.
No, well, the money's there. The first bit is a £220 million research project. Then we'll get into building the prototype power station, but it's a 50-year project. We will get the benefit of it for hundreds of years if we can get the science in the right place. There's no U-turning. I hope we can move on from all of that today and get on with sorting small boats out this afternoon.
Get on with sorting small boats this afternoon. Well, look, you brought it up. What do you want us to say?
I want it to be really robust. People often ask why my constituents in Mansfield care so much when they're so far from the sea. It's a fundamental issue of fairness. Why do I bother to work and pay into the system and do my bit when anybody can just show up and take out more than I get? Fundamentally, that speaks to, does this system work for normal working people in the UK? And it's unfair. And my whole constituency will expect her to be tough and make it happen, because we've talked about it for a long time.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? The idea of making it happen. And one would assume, just quickly on this one would assume that that would involve pulling out of some, what some would say, foreign courts and foreign laws, presumably.
There's definitely some of that. There's definitely some of the, like with the Rwanda scheme where we weren't able to implement it. There's definitely some stopping, pretending that we're paying the French to do something useful, because it seems quite clearly that they're not helping.
No.
And being robust, right? I think, and we've always had this conversation about Britain's place in the world, my constituents would much rather see us have a proper immigration policy that we can actually control than worry about what people in other countries think about it.
Yes, exactly. And just very, very finally, before we move on to something that the Shadow Chancellor had to say as well, your attire, I must say, is not what most Conservative MPs are rampaging through conference wearing. Can you explain the look?
I wear my Jose Mourinho coat, makes me feel powerful. No, I don't do suits for conference. I was vice chair for youth, and I got fed up of seeing lots of teenagers in suits. I'm trying to encourage something different.
Good lad. All right. Well, sorry, I've let the side down there. Although to be fair, I'm not a teenager, even though I haven't quite started shaving yet. Ben, thank you very much. Ben Bradley, great stuff. Just discussing to us what could be a massive breakthrough, a global breakthrough when it comes to powering our grid. And hey, it might keep the uncooperative crusties happy while we're at it as well. A win-win. Moving on. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves has renewed her call for the government to bring forward the publication of an independent forecast into the UK's economic outlook. So it comes as Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng told GB News, exclusively by the way with Liam Halligan, that his medium-term fiscal plan will not be brought forward. Rachel Reeves also urged the government to think again and to honour the commitments that they've previously made.
The government should have published the forecast from the Office of Budget Responsibility when they did the mini-budget. I wrote to the Chancellor at the weekend and said that they should now publish this coming Friday, when the Office of Budget Responsibility gives the government their forecast. The public should see it as well, and financial markets need to see it. The volatility that we've had in the last week and a half, with a huge spike in borrowing costs for government and also for families through mortgage rates, is causing huge anxiety. And government now need to get a grip, publish those forecasts. If they've got nothing to hide, what is stopping them?
Liz Truss hasn't committed to a real terms increase in benefits. What would Labour do?
Well, I've been meeting with families in Peterborough today who are worried sick about the cost of living, with the food shop, the energy bills, the mortgage rates all going up. And now the government not saying that for people with disabilities, for people on low incomes, that their benefits are going to keep up with the rising cost of living. That is also causing huge anxiety. And so I'd urge the government to think again and to honour the commitments that they have made previously.
Right, well, so far you've had the Chancellor, the Shadow Chancellor, a bit of nuclear energy, but crucially a lot about immigration. Why, you may ask? Well, because it is our immigration special, even though there's a few other stories in town. And don't forget, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is speaking live here at Conservative Party conference, and our viewers on television and online will be able to see that stage right now. The stage is set, the auditorium is slowly filling up. They've got about another hour or so until our new Home Secretary takes to that stage. She is expected to announce bold, bold, bold plans when it comes to tackling especially channel migration. We are expecting her to say that anyone who arrives here in a dinghy will not be allowed to stay in Britain, but how will she actually practically do that? There are other forms of illegal immigration. Is she going to talk about them? What do you want done? What do you think about the numbers of legal immigration? GB views at gbnews.uk. Keep them coming in, because we're going to be doing that all throughout our immigration special. But we have got loads of other things coming your way as well, because right here at Conservative Party Conference, one of the benefits of being live is that we can see people walking past and we can line them up as well. And it does come as well, of course, as it's still kicking off in Ukraine, to say the least, because Ukrainian talks have apparently, potentially anyway, broken down when it comes to a prospect of any kind of deal, I suppose, with Vladimir Putin. And it comes as Ukrainian troops have now retaken more territory in the regions illegally annexed by Russian President Putin last Friday. Later this afternoon, Foreign Secretary James Cleverly will be speaking at the Conservative Party conference, which is where I am right now. He's expected to say that we will help see Ukraine through to an unequivocal victory. One of the reasons why I said it's a great thing to be here at Party conference, because we can see people walking past, we can grab them, and that's exactly what we've just done with none less than former President of Ukraine. It's Petro Poroshenko, who joins me now. Thank you very much. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Good. What's the latest?
First of all, I think that this is extremely important to thank the British people, British government, British Parliament for the enormous leadership in the world, supporting Ukraine, supplying the weapons, introducing the sanction and embargo, and isolate Putin and Russia. And I'm really proud that during the last 10 days, Ukraine released from the Russian troops, liberate from the Russian troops, the territory almost like Wales. And this is definitely our success of our armed forces in Kupiansk, in Izum, in Balakleya, 2 days ago in Zaliv, and today I doubt that it is already in the news, but we have a great success in Kherson region.
Well, just talk to me a bit about that, because as you said, I'm not sure how much that's made it out into the British news yet, and we're live here on GB News, so just give our viewers and our listeners the inside scoop on that. What's gone on in Kherson?
Yeah, in Kherson we have 7 villages we will already take, but this is the breakthrough for 15-20 kilometers and to the river Dnieper, and that's create a big headache, a big problem for Russian troops. And this is just a demonstration that the best diplomat with Putin is Ukrainian armed forces. Putin is a crazy maniac. We do not trust Putin, but the whole world, because of Ukraine, do not afraid of Putin. And with that situation, I think that the last development of the situation can bring to the result that Russia would be thrown out from Ukraine.
Can you just make the case to our viewers here? Because I do get emails in a lot that say, right here, now in Britain, my energy bills are going up, the price of my food is going up, we've got prices left, right and centre. British people right here, like the people behind you right now, are skint. They've got no money, maybe. Why should these ordinary people keep paying their taxpayers' money to arm Ukraine?
I'll give you my own example. Before year 2014, that was a top priority. Prices, tariffs, level of salaries, level of pension, taxes. Before the 24th of February this year, this is also quite important, but imagine me, myself, 5th president of Ukraine, appeared at in the 5 in the morning the Russian missiles caliber, blasting 5 kilometers from my home. Within 2 hours, I'm already in the office, and we create the battalion of territorial defense with the weapon in the hands. Me, member of my team, starting to stop Russian troops, which was 5 kilometers from the office. And believe me, nothing important. Prices, salaries, tariffs.
That was all domestic.
If you have danger for the security, this is the top priority. And please understand that now this is not assistance for Ukraine. This is investing in your own security. Okay. And when you invest in security, definitely you can have a problem some others.
Very quickly, even though it's a big question, how likely is it that Putin will use nuclear weapons?
Now we don't have this danger.
Okay.
But I think that Putin is a crazy maniac. Nobody
This is why I asked.
Nobody can be predicted that Putin used the blackmail of starvation, of hunger, blocking Ukrainian ports. Nobody can imagine that Putin will attack nuclear power station in Zaporizhia, who is 10 times more powerful than Chernobyl. That's why we should wait from Putin everything. And the only way how we effectively can stop Putin is just to give the Ukraine chance to be a NATO member state. And with that situation, we will win.
Thank you very much, Petro Poroshenko, the former president of Ukraine. Great to have you on the show. Yes, all right, another one on the way out. Take care. All right, all the best. Right, okay, we are a bit pressed for time here, ladies and gentlemen, so strap yourselves in because we're going to try to rattle through this, even though it's a massive issue. Prime Minister Liz Truss has gone into battle with Tory rebels as she has tried to rein in benefit spending. It comes after reports that Liz Truss was considering reducing benefits in real terms after being forced to abandon the abolition of the 45p top rate of tax for basically the wealthy. Well, joining me on the show now is JP Fleurou, who is a solicitor and an author. I believe we have JP there. Yes, we do. Thank you very much. And we've got Devon Galani as well, who's the director at Policy in Practice. So we've got a bit of a debate. We're going to have to rattle through this. JP, I will start with you. Why do you think that Truss, well, what do you think Truss should do when it comes to benefits? Should we increase benefit spending?
Well, people all over the country try to balance their books, and it's about time the government does the same. And therefore, we'll have to find savings, and we should not exclude anything. We should try to find savings anywhere. We cannot go on in the way we have been going on for the last 10 years with massive spending, and growth destroying tax rates, the highest tax rate in 70 years. So yes, we should find savings everywhere.
Okay, that was JP Fleurou there. Devon Galani, who actually is sat next to me as it happens here now at Conservative Party conference, who is director at Policy in Practice. Talk to me then a bit about this. Why should we be increasing benefits, I mean, in line with inflation? Why should everybody else pay?
Because costs are going up, and you've got to remember a lot of these benefits go to people who are in work as well. So it's the only way you're going to, unless you want to go to the electorate and say you're going to be worse off than you were when I came in, you have to increase them in line with costs.
Okay, all right, I'll stick with you because that was quite brief, which is that, you know, there is some trope perhaps that some people on benefits should work harder and therefore not be on benefits. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, I think people want to work harder. Of course they want to work harder. So why aren't they working harder? I think that's a really important question to ask yourself. Is it because, you know, 1 penny off income tax is going to make the difference, or is it because they need some sort of extra local support to help them get into work, for the jobs to be there, for the economy to grow? I think there's this sort of set against, like, Liz Truss and Kwasi are against people being better off. Of course they want people to. You need the growth, but you also need the support around people to make sure they can get into those jobs.
JP, I'll throw it back to you, JP Fleurou, who is a solicitor and an author. Do you think that some people just need to get off the backside and work harder, or actually would the Tories be the nasty party if they didn't help them out a bit?
I know that's how they want to portray us, but I think when you cut tax on work, people work harder, then there is higher growth, and ultimately you raise more tax in total. And this is what happened when George Osborne did it in 2013-14. He reduced the top rate of income tax from 50p to 45p, and he raised 8 billion more. 8 billion which could be used on nurses and on doctors and on welfare. So yes, we should go on, continue to cut taxes to make the economy grow, so we raise more. We want to be Singapore, we don't want to be Belarus.
Okay. Devon, where's all this money coming from?
Well, you've got to grow the economy, you've got to get people into jobs, but ultimately you've also got to look after people. The question is, if you don't do it, what's going to happen to the money? So if people can't feed their kids, if they're worried about how they're going to get by, and this is really happening to people right now. You've got people who are genuinely eating less. This is kind of shown to be true. I was speaking at a Fringe event earlier with the Trussell Trust and the new Work and Pensions Minister, who have seen like the increased activity in food banks. So if people can't get by, they're not going to be as productive as they would be later on. It's going to hurt the country's growth. We're not going to be able to pay for it, and fundamentally we're in the managed decline that Liz and Kwasi want to get away from.
Okay, look, both of you, thank you very much. I'm so sorry, it was very, very short and sweet, this, but you understand the chaotic nature of a Conservative Party conference and everything that we've got to get through. So I really do appreciate it. Don't worry, we'll have you both back on to do it all again very, very soon. JP Thoreau there, who is a solicitor and indeed an author as well, and Devon Galani, who is the director at Policy in Practice. Thank you very much, both of you. Right, coming up, oh gosh, more on the government's plan to clamp down on illegal immigration. This is our immigration special right here on GBNews Live. Plus, we will hear as well, oh, they thought maybe this one will be buried, but it's not, because we're making sure it gets a bit of an airing. The COVID-19 inquiry that started today. What does it hope to reveal? Stay with me right here, Patrick Christys on GBNews Live. Don't you dare move. Well, you didn't have to move because I'm right back at you. It's Patrick Christys live here at Conservative Party conference in Birmingham, and in the next hour we're going to hear from Home Secretary Suella Braverman as she pledges to take a tougher stance on illegal immigration. We're going to be hearing from you as well. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Do you actually believe that she will stop the Channel migrant issue? But just before that, I've got the Secretary of State for Transport, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, who's speaking now.
It took 20,000 workers nearly 5 years to build. Today, 27,000 workers have spades in the ground, with so many of them working to reopen and transform. These will serve at the heart of our newest high-speed railway, delivering additional capacity for our network, drawing in huge investment into the region, and of course, therefore helping the whole country and our economy to grow. From land to sea, the UK also has a historic leadership in underwriting prosperity and trade. Shipping continues to drive the global economy today, just as it has done for millennia. Our seas are by far the most important arteries for global trade, carrying over 95% of all goods. But while our maritime industry normally conducts its business beyond the public gaze, recent events have thrust global supply chains right into the spotlight, and in particular, the importance of resilient and secure shipping routes. At Transport, we are charged with ensuring the security of all networks that moves goods, people, and information around the world, and that underpin our way of life and our economy. We have seen Putin weaponize food by trying to crush the economic and humanitarian criticality of Ukraine's agricultural economy. In blockading those Ukrainian ports, Putin has prevented the export of global grain supplies. So our maxim is to ensure the UK is and remains the most secure and reliable nation to trade with globally. Because at a time when Russian aggression is disrupting those established trade routes, it has never been more important for the international community to come together and protect global shipping. So we will work with all our partners to ensure maritime trade and travel continues to operate safely, securely, and sustainably right around the world. Now, conference, there is an elephant in the room today. We cannot ignore that 9 out of 10 train services were at a standstill last Saturday, with further strikes planned tomorrow and this coming Saturday. While our priority, our overwhelming objective, is to grow our economy and tackle the rising cost of living, we also have to deal with rolling strike action. Strikes disrupt everyday life for everyone and slow down our prospects for growth. The more quickly we can resolve these disputes, the sooner all our efforts can be spent on getting our economy motoring at full speed. Despite soaring international energy prices, the war in Ukraine and the continued global impact of COVID, we must of course take that necessary action to help our families and our businesses. We can only do this through growth and having the infrastructure that makes this possible. We want to transform the rail industry to make it sustainable for the next 100 years. So the very last thing that the country needs right now is more damaging industrial disputes. My message to the trade union membership is simple. Please take your seats at the negotiating table and let's find a landing zone which we can all work with. Punishing passengers and inflicting damage on our economy by striking is not the answer. As a former trade secretary, I know something about making deals. And I can tell you there is a deal to be done between the unions and our train operators. It's a deal that will require compromise. So I want to see positive proposals to bridge those differences. As part of these, I am asking industry to launch consultations on reforming our ticket office provision across the country. The way we buy everything from groceries to holidays has transformed over the last decade. Online shopping is increasingly the norm, and all our favourite retail stores are using the latest self-service tech, making the in-store experience quicker and smoother, with fewer queues and more convenience. And we are seeing the same trend on the railways with a huge increase in online ticket sales. Today, only 12% of transactions take place at ticket offices. So we need to be looking at ways to move with the trend and support our customers in the most effective way possible. There will be some stations where the ticket office will be important to the running of the station. In other areas, rail employees may be better in front of the glass, helping passengers in other ways. This is not about cutting jobs. This is about putting the passenger at the heart of the railway. We all want the same outcome, to modernise the railway so that customers can choose rail as their preferred travel method with confidence and with ease. So I hope that union leaders, together with employers, will work with us to deliver the much needed changes and resolution so that together we can grow the economy for everyone. Conference, just as coal power and steam propulsion powered a global revolution in growth and development, which transformed everything from medicines to transport and brought prosperity across the world, we are at the tipping point of another revolution that has the potential to transform. The way that all our modes of transport are powered is changing at pace. Hydrogen fuels, net zero emission vehicles, sustainable aviation fuels, green shipping corridors. Those markets that change first and have the potential to grow fastest will go the furthest. We want UK business to lead the way on this new clean growth revolution. So that's why we're investing record amounts in our roads, in our railways, and in future green transport solutions to provide the conditions that will make sure business can grow on the back of clean transport. Building the vital connections that will open up access to jobs, education, and housing across the whole of the United Kingdom. This government is unashamedly going for growth. Growth is key to delivering jobs, higher wages, and more money to invest in our world-class public services. And a key part of achieving that growth is keeping our promises and delivering for the people. Speaking as the Member of Parliament who has campaigned for dualling the A1, a road investment first promised in 1992, and I was elected on that promise, delivering on our promises is firmly on my mind. The A1 is just one example. The A303 is another. One of the main gateways to the southwest, It acts as a bottleneck to growth. So we are committed to getting these road solutions delivered. Delivery is the key, something my fantastic ministerial team are all focused on. Kevin Foster is taking on the challenge of modernising our railways. Catherine Fletcher will deliver the roads the Prime Minister has asked me to accelerate, which the Chancellor announced in his growth plan. Baroness Veer will work to decarbonise the aviation industry. And Lucy Fraser will be working on the future of transport, making it fit for a modern world. And our Parliamentary Private Secretaries Marco Longhi, Auntie Brown and Damien Moore in the Whip's office are going to help us to stay on track. As a rural constituency MP, do you know one of the most common issues that gets raised with me is the state of my local roads. Indeed, I became very popular overnight with many colleagues when I was given this new posting because I think we all have constituents raising similar issues with all of us. That's why we have set aside a pothole fund to repair 10 million potholes a year. So, motorway or local street? This is a government which will invest so that our country can grow. We are a team that is determined to get spades into the ground at pace. Conference, we've got a lot to do. It's time to get Britain moving. Thank you.
Okay, that was Anne-Marie Trevelyan there speaking, the Secretary of State for Transport. Potholes got a clap during that. I think she was talking a bit about strikes as well, but listening to it made me want to go on strike, frankly. She was talking here at Conservative Party conference about transport. There we go. Okay, but to be fair, the strike action is going to affect a lot of people tomorrow. And I can now go to someone who I hope, for the love of God, is a lot more interesting. Travel editor at The Independent, Simon Calder. Simon, don't talk to me about potholes. What's going on with the strikes?
Well, yeah, exactly. As Anne-Marie Trevelyan, the Transport Secretary there, was entertaining us all. Unfortunately, the signs are going up here at Crewe Station in Cheshire, announcing that there won't be any Avanti West Coast trains tomorrow. Train drivers working for 13 train operators are going on strike. That means apart from Avanti, you're not going to find any trains on, for example, Northern, on South Eastern and East Midlands Railway. If on some train operators where there is going to be a strike, like LNER and Great Western Railway, there will be some trains. And then I'm glad to say that actually a number of train operators, including ScotRail, Transport for Wales, Thameslink, Southern, Great Northern, will be running normally because their drivers aren't going on strike. But all of those places will be affected on Saturday when we have another RMT strike.
So, Simon, can I just say, sorry, I am someone who has to get on that Avanti West Coast service from exactly where you are down to London quite regularly, and there is no change to service there, because as far as I can tell, it never runs anyway.
Well, that's the big problem, yeah. And we've had, I was talking to Mick Lynch, General Secretary of the RMT Union, on the picket line on Saturday, on their last strike, and he was saying that Avanti West Coast, even when there isn't a strike, it doesn't work, exactly as you say. But having said all that, we are, I think, going to see a bit of action. You will have heard Anne-Marie Trevelyan saying there is a deal to be done. She wants to see positive proposals. But I tell you what else is happening. And that is, she said, for the first time I've heard her talk about the ticket offices, effectively wanting to close down lots of those because only 1 in 8 tickets is being bought. And that means if you're someone who likes to have their paper ticket, then, well, that might be something that gets incredibly a lot harder to get. And she was talking about getting people out of the ticket office and, as they are on the tube in London, actually serving customers more helpfully. But the trouble is, and this is where the RMT union have quite an interesting take on this, they obviously say the government wants to close down all ticket offices and it's terrible. Unfortunately for Ms Trevelyan, this time last year, she was campaigning not to have the booking office hours reduced at her constituency in station of Berwick-upon-Tweed. So one of those things where we just don't know. Also, we heard a lot of applause for potholes, as you say. She wants to improve the A303, the well-known traffic jam in Wiltshire, and nothing at all today about the third runway at Heathrow, interestingly.
Simon Calder, thank you very much. You managed to hit up trains, roads and a bit of planes as well. Never knowingly undersold. Simon there, just giving you the latest on what was Anne-Marie Trevelyan's speech here at Tory party conference. But you'll be pleased to know, ladies and gentlemen, we're back to immigration. That's right, because it is going to be our immigration special here, because in just under an hour we are going to be hearing from Suella Braverman, who will be revealing new plans for another crackdown, as she is believed to be about to put it, on migrants crossing the Channel. So a new law will mean that migrants will be facing a ban on claiming asylum when they enter the UK illegally, and that they will be deported, or could be deported, it should be said. Suella Braverman will be talking right here in about an hour's time on that exact issue in her first major speech as the new Conservative Home Secretary. Live in Birmingham, Darren McCaffrey joins me now, GB News' political editor. Darren, thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome.
Listen, what are we expecting? A landmark speech?
So what's really interesting is, because I was talking to the Prime Minister a little bit about this earlier, and it seems that, obviously trying to tackle the migrant boat crisis in the English Channel, although she wouldn't use the word crisis, Liz Truss, a little earlier, it's all about deterrence from their point of view, from the government's point of view. So they're trying to do two things. First of all, what we're going to hear from Suella Braverman a little later on this afternoon is this idea that you will not be able to claim asylum here if you do come illegally. And that will mean, of course, people will not have their right to reside here, even while there's an appeals process or whatever. The second thing is that the Prime Minister said earlier on today that they are now looking at doing deals with other countries outside of Rwanda, again, to try and manage this better. Now, Prime Minister last night, when I was talking to her, spoke about the fact that the EU has a deal with Turkey, for example, and indeed with Libya. So that's the kind of two-pronged approach. The only two big, massive questions in the room about it are, first of all, what is the European Convention on Human Rights going to say about the fact that you can come here and claim asylum if you arrive here and you are actually an asylum seeker? And second of all, it's great that she might want to sign different deals on top of the Rwanda one, but the Rwanda one isn't even working.
No, but this is it. Can I just ask you on that? Because we're going to go to, shortly anyway, to Henry Bolton for, I suppose maybe someone say, I don't know, the practical elements of this is someone who's been involved in border security, but from the political elements of this, right, what would happen? How unusual would it be if Britain just didn't adhere to what the ECHR wanted us to do?
Well, I mean, it's politically quite difficult in the sense that, there'll be a lot of people, even within the Conservative Party, who will find that. I mean, clearly, obviously, people will ask people to take cases to the European Court of Human Rights on all of this. But in the end, the government feel that they need to be doing something. They hope that this will be popular with kind of particularly red wall, kind of true blue kind of Conservative voters. The only question is that at the end of the day, people are pretty desperate people at times, want to come to this country. And actually, if people are determined to do so, it's very, very difficult for the government to stop that.
Darren McCaffrey, thank you very much, our political editor. We're going back to Blighty now, back to base in Paddington with Henry Bolton, who is the former leader of UKIP and an international security and border control expert. Henry, thank you very much. Potentially music to your ears, if indeed Suella Braverman, who we're going to be taking live, by the way, here on GB News very, very shortly, does say that anyone who arrives here in a dinghy will definitely not be granted asylum. The big question for me is, where on earth do we deport them?
Well, I've got loads of questions, Patrick. Is it music to my ears? Yes, superficially. But we've been here before. And I know Suella Braverman. She's got the right intent. She's got the right courage. But has she got a deep enough plan here? And I do not believe the answer to that question is yes. And part of the reason for that is because however good she might be and whatever her intention is, she hasn't got the expertise and the knowledge around her in the Home Office to make such a thing work. And you mentioned earlier, well, the practical and the political, but actually at this level, those two things come together. And there is no way this can work without some serious conversations taking place in the United Nations over the refugee convention, and also, as has already just been said, in relation to the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, parliamentary sovereignty means that actually an act of the British Parliament is sovereign. It is not questioned and cannot be questioned in the courts because Parliament makes
and just
law.
on this, Henry, just on this. Other countries ignore rulings all the time. Why don't we start doing it a bit more often? In fact, aren't we one of the top compliers?
No, I agree with you, Patrick, and there are all sorts of things to unpack here, but my point is that this isn't just an issue for the Home Office. I'd like to see the government act a lot more courageously and a lot more forward-leaning on this and say, you know what, this is a whole-of-government thing, and it's not just about immigration, it's about firearms coming into the country, it's about cocaine, it's about opiates, heroin and so on coming into the UK. Our borders are not secure. It just so happens that one of the most sort of publicly obvious demonstrations of that is the dinghies coming across the channel. And indeed, it's a massive problem and has to be stopped. But it's not simply a case of the Home Secretary coming up with a plan or an Act of Parliament. It actually requires a great deal of upstreaming, as it's called, disruption, going all the way along those routes, all the way up those routes, actually going after, hunting the people smugglers who are responsible. And I know because I've done it on the ground in places like the Balkans. I've gone after these people until Tony Blair pulled the funding on it in 2006. But I know that there are what we call nexus points in terms of service providers. And those nexus points, let's say it's somebody who produces false travel documentation or ID cards. And one particular case that I personally dealt with in terms of disrupting involved 4 people of a terrorist network being moved through a people smuggling network. But the point that where we discovered that was as somebody who made false Norwegian ID cards. And that person was providing those to weapons smugglers, narcotic smugglers and people smugglers, as well as terrorist organisations. And so we've got a whole thing here that we have to unpack. And that requires the Foreign Office to engage. It requires the international aid budget to engage. It requires diplomatic engagement with the United Nations and with the European Union. And it requires some incredible robustness.
Henry, just quickly, please do not tell me that we're pinning our hopes on the French here.
Well, we shouldn't be. No, Patrick, we shouldn't be. And if you think back, we left the European Union in part to take control of our borders. Bear in mind that although the French, I think, could do a lot more, the reality is that the French don't have full control over the external borders of the European Union, nor do they have control over the European Union's immigration and asylum policy. There is the French. We should be working with the French to upstream disrupt this because the French don't want these people there any more than we want them here. So let's work with them on that point,
Henry,
rather than in confrontation with them.
All right, good stuff. Henry, thank you very, very much. Henry Bolton there, back at base, as it were, in our Paddington studios. Thank you very much. Former leader of UKIP and, of course, a border and security expert as well. As far as I'm concerned, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you, but I want to hear from your views as well. gbviews@gbnews.uk. The Rwanda stuff, that wasn't a deterrent. But you know why? Well, I'll tell you. It's because they just don't believe that we're actually going to take any action whatsoever. So it's all very well and good talking about a conjoined approach and needing to work with this person and that person. And yes, we do. And maybe we do need to ditch some foreign courts and some foreign judges. I understand all of that stuff. However, we actually need to show clear, practical action. Otherwise, it's not going to change. But the news has angered charity Care for Calais, and their founder, Claire Mosley, shock horror, has said, this proposal by the new Home Secretary is barbaric, untruthful, and unnecessary. The government's rhetoric around people crossing the channel is simply false. There is a mountain of evidence that the vast majority of genuine refugees, this criminalisation of them is blatant victim blaming of incredibly vulnerable people simply for the purpose of grabbing headlines. Well, on this very issue, given that we are now awaiting, we're edging ever closer to Suella Braverman, our new Home Secretary, talking live here on GB News, outlining what we expect to be an incredibly bold plan to tackle illegal immigration, especially what's going on in the Channel. Loads of you have been getting in touch, answered the call for our emails, and George says, I've said it repeatedly, we are in a national emergency with the daily invasion of foreign criminal gangs across the Channel. This is, of course, George's view, with the French not helping us at all. He says that our own Home Office are aiding criminals. The only answer is to hell with the ECHR, is to send the SAS over there every single night to deflate traffickers' boats before they even set sail. Only then will they all know that this country is no longer the world's soft touch. It's strong stuff from George. Steve says, the only reason the Tories had their 80-seat majority was thanks to us Red Wall voters who trusted Boris to give us Brexit and stop illegal immigration. He's been ousted by a bunch of MPs, and those same MPs are now stabbing their new leader in the back already. Stop the illegals now, or let Starmer in with a massive majority. But this is the problem, isn't it? Keir Starmer basically whispered quietly at a Labour Party conference, which I was at last week, said, oh, I'll have a points-based immigration system. Yeah, fine, nothing about the Channel. If people think that they're sick and tired of voting Tory because they think Labour will actually do anything about the Channel, in my opinion, that is wishful thinking. Why? Well, because we've seen no evidence to the contrary, have we? This is GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I want to give you a quick tease as to what we've got coming up, because I'm going to be speaking to Laura Dodsworth about the COVID inquiry which started today. We are focusing this show because Suella Braverman's coming up later on immigration and what she's going to say about what's going on in the Channel. But we also wanted to hit a couple of other little stories for you as well. Not so little, actually, for many of you. The COVID inquiry. Yes, what's been going on with that today? What will the outcome be? Some uncomfortable truths, potentially, for, dare I say it, some members of the medical community and indeed political bigwigs who were in charge at the time. The chairwoman says that bereaved families and those who suffered will be at the heart of the investigation, as she promised to be fair and thorough. What will it all come to? We're going to deal with all of that and much, much more very, very shortly from a frenetic Conservative Party conference here in Birmingham. We're back in a mo.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back, lovely people, to GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. Don't forget now, the Home Secretary Suella Braverman's speech will be live from the stage, which I believe we're going to show you very, very soon. There will be no stage picture live on air, but you can picture it. It's a stage, and she'll be on it talking about illegal immigration, and that'll be live here at Conservative Party Conference very, very shortly, so don't you dare move. But before that, another story that's very close to all of your hearts, some would say quite literally sometimes, is the UK's public COVID inquiry, which began today. Opening proceedings, Chairwoman Baroness Heather Hallett said that bereaved families and those who suffered will be put at the very heart of this inquiry. The former Court of Appeal judge promised that she would conduct a thorough and fair hearing. Well, the sessions will focus on how prepared the UK was for a pandemic in 2020. Those hearings will largely be procedural as well, as we understand it. And of course, she's going to say that they will be very, very thorough and fair. We can hear a bit from her now.
I promised the bereaved during the consultation process on the terms of reference that those who have suffered will be at the heart of the inquiry.
Right, we're going to go live now to Laura Dodsworth, who's an author of A State of Fear, a book arguing that the UK government used fear as a weapon during the COVID-19 pandemic. Laura, thank you very, very much. Right, OK, so this inquiry into the pandemic and our response to it, do you worry that it might actually ignore victims in terms of a sense of people who felt as though they couldn't leave their own homes, the fear-mongering of it, as it were, or will it just focus on people who, rightly so, by the way, I can understand there needs to be a focus on these people, the people who died?
I completely agree. I think this inquiry should be very multifaceted. First of all, I want to thank you for covering this story, because it would be so easy right now for this story to be buried in the current news. You know, we've got the Conservative Party conference, we've got an economic crisis going on, there's a lot of other things happening. But it's really important to contextualise this. We are where we are now because of the pandemic response. You know, we have high inflation, okay? We've got a cost of living crisis, and unarguably, you know, a major contributing factor to that is a huge amount of quantitative easing at a time when the economy was shut down. We also have a tragic level right now of excess deaths, which the media is not really scrutinising in the same way that they did when there were excess deaths caused by COVID. Where's the investigation into all the people dying? I think, you know, in the last 19 weeks, we've had something like 10,000 more deaths than we would expect compared to pre-pandemic years. There's also a mental health, depression, educational crisis going on. All of these are related to the pandemic, but also to the pandemic response. So we are where we are now because of what happened. So the danger with the inquiry is that we look back at what happened.
I'm quite keen as well. I'm just quite keen as well. Sorry to interrupt you, but just to add to that, children as well. I mean, I've been hearing reports, and I've even reported on it myself, about, in some cases, early years children going to school after the first couple of years of their life being in lockdown, unable to walk or talk or communicate properly. I mean, I'm concerned that this inquiry might end up just being some kind of lovey whitewash that basically says we should have locked down harder, faster, quicker and for longer. And indeed, actually, we should have seen this coming a long time ago.
I absolutely share your concerns. But let's not forget, children were not in the terms of reference in the first draft of the COVID inquiry. And in fact, it was due to the campaigning of certain individuals and organisations, including Us for Them, that the terms of reference were widened to include children. So now it's going to look at early years in education and mental and physical health. And that's really, really important. Now, I submitted my own evidence and recommendations for the terms of reference, which have not been taken on board, that the inquiry should also look at the behavioural science approach. Now, back at a number 10 briefing in 2020, in March 2020, Michael Gove said this virus does not discriminate. Well, they knew then, and we know now, that the virus does discriminate. In fact, it was highly stratified according to age and clinical condition. And yet there was a campaign that pressed ahead with the public saying that all age groups were at risk. We know that fear and other behavioural science techniques we deployed in order to encourage people to follow the rules. Now, all of that was done outside of a robust ethical framework or cost-benefit analysis, and very importantly, without the public's consent. So I'm worried that none of that will be looked at. Furthermore, you know, on top of that as well, I think that we need to look
very quickly, Laura. Go on very quickly.
Actually, to a new Public Health Act. We need to make sure that the things that happened before don't happen again.
All right, Laura, thank you very much. Sorry to rush you, but I hope you understand this is the nature of the show here today. We're live at Tory Party Conference, and there's a world of stuff going on all around me as I'm live with you. So thank you very much. Laura Dodsworth, there, author of A State of Fear, just responding to the fact that it's the first day of the COVID pandemic inquiry. We're going to be gripped to this, frankly. I certainly am, on GB News Live, 3 till 6 every single day. We're going to be having a little look, at least, as to what is going on at this inquiry, because I am riveted by it. So many different offshoots that we can go on that one. How do you feel, though, about that one? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Right now, Ofgem, moving on. Ofgem has warned that there's a significant risk of winter gas shortages in the UK. What will all of this mean for you? We're going to get stuck into that and take a little bit of a different angle on it as well, because if you're wondering why in some areas people aren't going for things like shale gas, fracking underneath their feet, it's not actually just because they're all so focused on the environment. No. In some cases, it's the eco-mob who are intimidating them and making their lives a misery. And it's about time someone spoke about it, which what we will. But first, it's the headlines.
Coming up to 35 minutes past 4, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. The Chancellor has exclusively told GB News his medium-term fiscal plan will not be brought forward and will be delivered as planned at the end of November. Kwasi Kwarteng is under pressure to give more details on how he'll reduce the country's debt. It follows market turmoil, which saw sterling plummet after the mini-budget was announced 11 days ago. The Chancellor told us fiscal decisions were made during a difficult period.
Time that we did it. And also you've got to remember the context. I mean, what was extraordinary about that month was that we had a new government and also we had the sad passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So we had a nation in mourning. And then literally, I think 4 days after the funeral, we had the mini-budget. It was high-speed, high-pressure environment. And we could have got, as David Cameron used to say, prepared the pitch a bit better.
Well, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves has responded to those comments. She says she's written to the Chancellor demanding greater transparency.
This coming Friday, when the Office of Budget Responsibility gives the government their forecast, the public should see it as well, and financial markets need to see it. The volatility that we've had in the last week and a half, with a huge spike in borrowing costs for government and also for families through mortgage rates, is causing huge anxiety. And government now need to get a grip, publish those forecasts. If they've got nothing to hide, what is stopping them?
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has told GB News she'll look at all options to address illegal channel crossings, including deals beyond Rwanda. She was also asked if she'd described the migrant situation as a crisis.
The label crisis that's not the point. The point is it shouldn't be happening and we're going to stop it happening.
Are you going to do more deals beyond Rwanda, do you think?
I do want to look at more deals beyond Rwanda. I also want to make the Rwanda policy work by making sure we can control our own laws and we can't be overruled by the ECHR.
TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick will be back just a moment.
Day afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune in apps. on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys, here at Tory Party Conference. Now, the government says it's exploring the potential of locking in long-term deals to import gas from Norway and elsewhere in an effort to keep the lights on this winter. Well, the energy regulator Ofgem has warned that there's a, quote, significant risk of gas shortages this winter amid a gas supply emergency. Other measures include deals to keep coal-fired power stations on standby. The International Energy Agency's warned that gas markets could remain constricted into next year as Russia restricts our supplies. But joining me now is the one and only Charles McAllister, Director of Policy at UK Onshore Oil and Gas. And I want to take a slightly different tack to all of this, because people have been saying, hang on a minute, why aren't we just essentially mining our own resources? We're standing on billions and billions and billions of pounds of capacity. Trillions. And people go, trillions, there you go. People are going, well, hang on a minute, it's because of NIMBYs, because of people who say, not in my backyard. But actually, you think there's a different reason, don't you? When you talk to local people, is it because they're too afraid to say yes because of the eco mob?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I can just explain the gas shortage, if we can pull it back to November of last year, the government released a statutory security of supply report. What they said was, there's no issue, we'll have secure supplies. Fast forward only 9-10 months, as you say, the Ofgem, the regulator, are saying significant risk. Just shows you what can happen in a short period of time. But you're absolutely right. So I've been to many of the 120 onshore oil and gas sites in the UK. When I speak to local people, there is support there. I mean, this industry is 170 years old. We're not new. The concern, the issue, is local people are afraid of sticking their head above the parapet.
Why?
Fear of retribution from, quite frankly, a mob.
Like physical attacks?
Well, various things. I mean, if I can just give you some examples of the activities that some of the protesters against fracking sites have taken. So, two for me. Number one, some protesters broke into an active gas site in North Yorkshire, scaled a 60-foot rig and set off a flare at the top on an active gas site.
I mean, they're not the sharpest.
I don't think I need to say to you that clearly isn't safe.
No.
So that's one example. Another one is the head of the North West Ambulance Service had to write a letter to Lancashire County Council because the ambulances were called to the Preston New Road site 7 times. In each of those occasions, the head of the ambulance service said there were no injuries, there were no issues, and people refused to go to hospital. Not only that, he said he witnessed abuse of staff. So these protesters, I think their behaviour is absolutely unacceptable, and we cannot let them dictate government policy. So we have to go for fracking. The alternative is totally economically, environmentally, and geopolitically unacceptable.
Yeah, we're hearing about things like a U-turn on tax cuts for the rich, a cost of living crisis, an energy crisis, and all of this stuff. Well, hang on a minute, we might have more money if we went for fracking, but one of the reasons why we're not at the minute potentially is a fear of public backlash. What you're saying is it's not really backlash from residents, it's fear of an eco mob who are in turn intimidating the residents.
Yeah, absolutely. So the group, I do a lot of the public information days for shale gas companies, and a concern with local people isn't against shale gas, it's if there is shale gas development, protesters will come.
Right.
That's a legitimate concern.
Yeah, but it's how we deal with the protesters.
I really think it is. And this idea, it's been said, government have said shale gas will only go ahead with local support. Now, the reason why the industry wasn't able to develop at the start is because from a regulatory perspective, we were demonised. So, for example, the regulations that were set for us on seismicity, if you had applied those to the geothermal, construction, quarrying industry, none of them would be able to operate in the UK. So we need consistency in order to develop. This test of local support, whatever it means, because we don't know, isn't being applied to other sectors.
But actually, maybe we've got to the crux of this now, because for some people wondering why locals would go against something, bear in mind that they could actually have a share in some of this stuff. They could actually, I mean, they could take home cash in wheelbarrows if they said yes to it, couldn't they?
Not could, they will. Okay?
Right.
So for an exploration site, £100,000 goes to the local community. Even if we find absolutely nothing, they get money. Companies also give a share of revenue. So we always do it in terms of percentages. So up to 6% goes to local people. To put that in number terms, current gas prices, 40 well site, roughly 4 hectares, about 2 times the size of a football pitch, up to £400 million for a village.
Right, but this is unbelievable, isn't it? Because you actually would clearly say yes to that. I mean, most people in their right minds would say yes to this, wouldn't they? I mean, I certainly would. But the reason why they're not, and maybe this is what the eco-mob have realised, is that actually the way to stop this is to say, there's no public support. Well, how do you stop public support for something that could essentially secure not just your own bank balance, but your kids and your grandkids and generations to come? It's by intimidating them.
Jobs, yeah, exactly. Jobs, economic, environmental and geopolitical benefits of shale gas development are not met by continuing down reliance on imports. Simple as that.
All right, good stuff. Now, I know you've had a busy time here at the conference. I'll let you go and get some kip now. Thank you very, very much, Charles McAllister, there, Director of Policy at UK Onshore Oil and Gas. Right, well, look, loads more to come now, because we have been billing this as our immigration special. And the reason why we've been doing that is because we are looking ahead, aren't we, to Suella Braverman's big speech in 15 minutes' time, hopefully, unless she's late. She's going to be standing in a room just over the way from me there, discussing her plans to tackle illegal immigration right here in the UK. An issue, frankly, that is number 1, number 2, maybe on a bad day, number 3 for the vast majority of people in this country. And why is that? Well, let me give you some numbers. 60,000. 60,000, that's the number of people predicted to cross the channel in dinghies this year. 240,000, that's the number of net migration into the UK in 2021. And yes, there we go. A lot of numbers there, a lot of very large numbers. What Suella Braverman is expected to say is that she's going to stop anyone who lands on a British beach here in a dinghy from claiming asylum in this country. Do you believe her? Do you back her? I went to find out what people here at Conservative Party Conference in Birmingham at 2022 actually thought should be done to tackle the issue of illegal immigration in this country. Let's find out.
To be a strong policy. You look at Poland, what a prime example, that knew how to defend its borders from illegal migration. If you want to be a legal migrant, like the Ukrainians now who are suffering, escaping, they can come, apply, and they're very welcomed to Poland. And those illegals who tried to force their way through Belarus, they were just simply turned back.
The whole country is tired of this situation with illegal immigrants entering the country. We cannot tolerate this any longer. It's costing a lot of money. They are illegal immigrants, the criminals. We must return these people to wherever they came from.
It's probably much more complicated than most of your commentators and the viewers think.
Okay. Well, so do you think there is anything that we can do, or should we just?
Well, there's lots of things we can do, but none of them are simple. And I think the simple solutions are almost certainly the wrong ones.
We need to deal with the criminal gangs that are bringing people here, because actually, unless we solve that problem, we're not going to solve it all. So I think the government's been trying to do that with the Rwanda scheme, which I would support, but which is controversial. But ultimately, we've got to deal with the root cause of it, and we've got to work with the French, I think, as well.
As a nation, we should provide support to people. Refugees, economic migrants are 2 very different things, though. So if it's an economic migrant, it's a different story, and they should provide something for the country. Refugees, on the other hand, we should be looking to support, get them up on their feet, and then turn hopefully into something that will, build up the economy. And
OK, well, those were the views of some people here at Conservative Party conference. Those people, no doubt, will be queuing up to go and watch Suella Braverman as she delivers her speech very shortly, which we'll be bringing to you live on GB News. Don't miss it, people. Don't go away. Don't bother going away and get yourself a cup of tea, because it's going to be box office, this, all right? She is essentially, as we understand it, going to say that anyone who arrives here in a dinghy is not going to be allowed to stay, but there's lots of knock-on effects to this. What does this really mean? Are we going to finally end the influence of foreign judges in our own immigration system? Could it be the real thing? Well, the Prime Minister herself has also said that she's determined to get tough with people traffickers who illegally bring migrants into the UK. Is it more hot air? Do you believe that she'll actually do it? It's a key part of her vision, though, which she says will include not being overruled by the European Court of Human Rights. Her comments were made in this interview with our very own political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Here is the Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, thank you. I suppose, first of all, let's start with the economy and the size of the state. I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that you are someone who wants to see a smaller state. What does that mean? What bits do you think the state is doing that's too much?
Well, what I want to see is a faster growing private sector, because I want to see investment and enterprise across our country. I want to see high wage jobs for people. I want to see more opportunity, and also I want to see more revenue generated for taxes to spend on our public services. So that's all about having successful businesses, making it easier to start up your own business and making it easier to get onto the jobs ladder and get a high wage job. That's what I'm about.
But the state's doing too much, don't you think?
Well, what I think is that the private sector hasn't grown fast enough.
Lots of talk about November 23rd. Is it going to be this month? Is it going to be November 23rd? This announcement in the OBR forecasts?
Well, we've got the date of November the 23rd.
So this is when we're
going to set out the OBR forecast, but also our medium-term fiscal plan. And what we've done is we've had to take very urgent action to deal with the immediate issues we face: the energy price, the inflation, and a slowing global economy. And if you remember, people were facing energy bills of £6,000. We've dealt with that. You know, the maximum is now $2,500 for a typical family. That's also going to help curb inflation by up to 5%.
Is what's been happening in the English Channel this year a crisis?
Look, I'm determined that we get to grips with what's been happening with small boats. These appalling people traffickers are causing huge human misery, and we need to get to grips with it. And that is what the Home Secretary is determined to do.
The record numbers, I mean, is it a crisis? I mean, for lots of voters, they really do think it's a crisis. The government's just not been managed to get grips with.
The label crisis is, that's not the point. The point is it shouldn't be happening, and we're going to stop it happening.
Are you going to do more deals beyond Rwanda, do you think?
I do want to look at more deals beyond Rwanda. I also want to make the Rwanda policy work by making sure we can control our own laws and we can't be overruled by the ECHR.
Just very finally, Prime Minister, on you. A lot of people supported you this summer because they thought that you were someone who was going to stick by your word, that you wouldn't U-turn. And yet, in the first couple of weeks, you've already done a massive U-turn. How can you convince people that, you know, you're not going to do that in future?
Well, the package that we announced was a very important package: the energy price guarantee, the tax reductions on national insurance, keeping corporation tax low. The 45 pence was a relatively small part of that package. What I did is I listened to people. And I am somebody with clear convictions who wants to get things done, but I'm also somebody who listens to reason. And the fact is the 45p was creating a distraction from what we were trying to achieve with the package, which is supporting people through this winter, but also making sure that we're getting our economy growing in the long term.
Do you get my point, though, as in, like, as I say, people liked you because, essentially, you weren't going to U-turn, and now you have. That it seems that the party's in charge of you, not you in charge of the party.
The vast majority of our package is proceeding, and in fact, we've already implemented the energy price guarantee. We're implementing the national insurance reverse. We're keeping corporation tax low. But it's also right that a Prime Minister listens to people. And I'm somebody who listens to people, who takes things on board and who acts decisively. And what I've done this week is I've acted decisively to deal with this issue, which was creating a distraction from what is a very exciting growth package.
Can you trust? Will you believe it when you see it, given that we've already had one U-turn and countless Home Secretaries talking tough and then doing nothing, especially when it comes to what's going on in the Channel? We are expecting Suella Braverman any minute now-ish to be taking to the stage here at Conservative Party conference to give you the very latest on what she thinks should be done to tackle illegal immigration into the UK. Maybe, just maybe this time, people will get lucky and something will happen. But in response to what we've been speaking about, Steve Valdez-Simmons from Amnesty International, the UK's refugee migrant rights director, warned that declaring the country a, quote, asylum-free zone would make the UK a beacon for illegality, and that the government's behaviour was doing serious damage to the UK's international reputation. It's interesting that, though, because presumably it would only be a, quote, beacon of illegality if we were continuing to flout international law, which, reading between the lines, people, would seem to hint as though we might be about to make serious changes to where we stand as a country when it comes to international law, foreign courts, and those judges from Moldova who've been telling us who we can and can't let into our own country, which I think is an absolute scandal. But lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on illegal immigration. Matthew says Macron has absolutely no interest in stopping illegal migrants because they often leave France and it is not his problem and his financial burden. Some would say, though, that if he was a decent little chap, then he might actually do what we've been paying him to do. But you know what? Well, I don't know. Maybe someone ran at him and he just went into full-scale retreat. That wouldn't be like them, would it? Dave says we should get behind the government and give Suella Braverman a chance. This should be dealt with appropriately without the need to consult various foreign bodies. Thank you very much. Spot on. To get permission to safeguard our borders and our population. Exactly. Are you sick and tired of foreign influence when it comes to our own affairs? Linda says we need to turn the boats away and not let them land. The RNLI and other agencies must stop facilitating this. Enough is enough. That's the views of Linda. Keep your views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk. There's one massive, whopping, great big elephant in the room, though, isn't there? And that is whether or not you actually believe that anything serious will happen. Coming up, the Home Secretary, live here on GB News, is due to speak at the Conservative Party conference, outlining how she plans to tackle illegal immigration. She appears to be talking tough, saying that no one who lands here on a beach in Kent or wherever will be allowed to stay. How are we going to do that, people? Do you think it's the right thing to do? Is it, frankly, enough? Patrick Christys here, right here on GB News Live. Before that, it's your weather.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather updates. A mild night to come tonight and then a very wet and windy start to Wednesday. But skies should start to brighten as we go through the day. Low pressure up to the north, but actually it's this development out in the Atlantic that we're watching closely. This weather front turning into an area of low pressure. The isobars squeezing together, hence why it is turning windy tonight and tomorrow. Ahead of that, still outbreaks of rain across southern Scotland and parts of Wales, and then we'll see things turning wet rapidly this evening for Northern Ireland. That rain spreading back north across much of Scotland. The rain getting heavier through the night across Wales and into northwest England. Much of the Midlands and eastern England will stay dry. The winds, though, will be picking up, but bringing mild air. Temperatures staying in double figures for most in the teens across the south. This rain is going to be heavy, particularly across parts of southwest Scotland, and the winds are going to be lively as well. Our Met Office yellow warnings in place. A wet and windy start for most of the country on Wednesday, but the rain will take till the afternoon before it reaches East Anglia and the southeast. As it clears, which it will do for most through the morning, brighter skies will follow, along with a whole raft of showers. After a mild start, it'll probably turn a little cooler into the afternoon, despite some sunshine, fresher air moving in, and certainly feeling fresh in that gusty wind, which will continue to blow showers in off the Atlantic as we head through Wednesday night and into Thursday. That's how Thursday's looking, really, a mixture of sunshine and showers, with these westerly winds continuing to feed the showers in, lots of them across Scotland, Northern Ireland, North Wales and northwest England. Not many further south, so Thursday across much of southern England will be dry and fine with sunny spells, a bright and breezy kind of day, and we probably won't get too many showers across eastern areas. Even parts of northeast Scotland should be well sheltered. A breezy day on Thursday, but not as windy as tomorrow, and temperatures a little higher, getting into the mid to high teens.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Well, hello and welcome back to GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys, live here from Conservative Party Conference in Birmingham. In the next hour, we'll be hearing from the Home Secretary. The climax of this show, our immigration special, Suella Braverman, will be live on GB News here for you, as she is set to unveil a new policy on how to deal with migrants crossing over the Channel. The question is, for many people across the country, though, it's unlike Home Secretary's previous. Will Suella actually go through with her promises? Will you believe it when you see it? We've got all of that coming your way and much, much more. But it does appear that in a matter of moments, we're about to hear a Home Secretary say, potentially, that nobody who arrives here in a dinghy will be allowed to stay. All of that's coming your way and much, much more after the latest headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 5 o'clock. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. The Chancellor has exclusively told GB News his medium-term fiscal plan will not be brought forward and will be delivered as planned at the end of November. Kwasi Kwarteng is under pressure to give more details on how he'll reduce the country's debt. It follows market turmoil, which saw sterling plummet after the mini-budget was announced 11 days ago. The Chancellor told us fiscal decisions were made during a difficult period.
It was a very quick time that we did it. And also you've got to remember the context. I mean, what was extraordinary about that month was that we had a new government and also we had the sad passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So we had a nation in mourning. And then literally, I think 4 days after the funeral, we had the mini-budget. It was high speed, high pressure environment. And we could have got, as David Cameron used to say, prepared the pitch a bit better.
Well, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says she's written to Kwasi Kwarteng demanding greater transparency.
This coming Friday, when the Office of Budget Responsibility gives the government their forecast, the public should see it as well, and financial markets need to see it. The volatility that we've had in the last week and a half, with a huge spike in borrowing costs for government and also for families through mortgage rates, is causing huge anxiety. And government now need to get a grip, publish those forecasts. If they've got nothing to hide, what is stopping them?
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has told GB News she'll look at all options to address illegal channel crossings, including deals beyond Rwanda. She was asked if she would describe the current migrant situation as a crisis.
The label crisis that's not the point. The point is it shouldn't be happening and we're going to stop it happening.
Are you going to do more deals beyond Rwanda, do you think?
I do want to look at more deals beyond Rwanda. I also want to make the Rwanda policy work by making sure we can control our own laws and we can't be overruled by the ECHR.
The Transport Secretary has urged rail unions to stop damaging the economy by striking over pay. Speaking at the Tory party conference, Anne-Marie Trevelyan said ongoing industrial action is punishing passengers. Insisting there was a deal to be done, she asked unions and their members to compromise for the benefit of the country.
The trade union membership is simple. Please take your seats at the negotiating table and let's find a landing zone which we can all work with. Punishing passengers and inflicting damage on our economy by striking is not the answer.
In other news, a 14-year-old boy is in custody after being arrested on suspicion of the murder of another teenager in Gateshead. Northumbria Police says it found a 14-year-old boy with injuries consistent with having been caused by a bladed article just after 8 o'clock last night. A 13-year-old girl also remains in custody after being arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. The family of a man who was shot by police in South London are calling for an urgent decision on whether the officers involved will face criminal charges. The inquest into Chris Carber's death has been opened and adjourned to allow the police watchdog to investigate. The 24-year-old was killed after a police car chase last month. He was unarmed. The IOPC says its investigation is expected to last 6 to 9 months. Rebecca Vardy has been ordered to pay £1.5 million towards Colleen Rooney's legal costs after losing a High Court battle. Ms Vardy sued for libel after Ms Rooney accused her of leaking posts from her private Instagram account to the Sun newspaper. The judge from the so-called Wagatha Christie case ruled Mrs Vardy should pay 90% of Mrs Rooney's legal costs. The Prince of Wales has called on people to, quote, intensify their work on bringing an end to the illegal wildlife trade. In his first speech since gaining his new title, Prince William addressed the United for Wildlife Summit at the Science Museum in London. He highlighted the damage caused by wildlife trafficking and the impact on biodiversity and local communities. The Prince, who helped found the organisation back in 2014, says there's much more to be done.
So I call on all of you here today and those involved in United for Wildlife further afield. Keep breaking the mould. Keep building bridges and making those game-changing connections. Keep believing that this is a crime that can be ended once and for all. Because I know with your commitment, it can.
OK, this is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Patrick.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, we're getting towards the business time of this show. It's Patrick Christys here for GB News live at Conservative Party conference, where in the next few minutes, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is expected to unveil new plans for another crackdown on migrants crossing the Channel. You might be able to hear that the noise around me is upped a little bit as the atmosphere builds. It's expected that there will be a new law that will allow the deportation of illegal immigrants, which will mean that they can't claim asylum when entering the UK. Now, there's lots of specifics to go into with all of this. Suella Braverman is going to have to do that herself because a lot of people are scratching their heads as to, A, whether or not she's actually going to be able to do it. Why has she now managed to invent something that other Home Secretaries apparently have been unable to do? Potentially international law at play as well. Loads to get stuck into here, but we are reaching, as I've said, the business end of our immigration special here on GB News. And I am joined now by GB News' political reporter, Catherine Forster. Thank you very, very much, Catherine. Great to have you on the show. I understand that it's been quite chaotic here, so we're going to go into that a little bit later. But I think it's relevant to maybe ground ourselves in a bit of Priti Patel, because Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary, spoke very tough about immigration. Some people said that Priti Patel became pretty useless. I couldn't possibly comment, but what have you got for us?
Well, I was at, she did a fringe event in the last couple of hours in the Thatcher Theatre. It was packed to the seams, loads of applause, obviously still very popular with many people in the party. And she was still bigging up her achievements over immigration. Difficult really to see how that stacks up. Given vast amounts of money were spent on the Rwanda plan, she's still standing by that, still saying that's going to work. But of course, a lot of money has been spent. But she did make a good point about, obviously, immigration, illegal immigration across the Channel is costing us a lot of money. We've got a little clip, let's have a look.
Yep.
Of course, I took robust action to tackle illegal migration and end the abuse of the asylum system, as outlined in the new plan for immigration. The foundations I have laid will deliver the most radical reform of these policy areas. Radical, but importantly, rooted in conservative values, but only if they are adequately and fully enacted.
Yes, interesting stuff there. The back end of that clip, from what I could hear, it's difficult because the atmosphere is really building ahead of Suella Braverman's talk. Was that it's all very well and good coming up with ideas, but they need to be properly enacted, I think is the gist of what she was saying there. What's the mood like then when it comes to the Tories at the moment, from what you can gather? Because it just seemed a little bit chaotic. And immigration, dare I say it, what Suella Braverman's about to say, as we think she's about to say, could maybe unite people behind the scenes a little bit? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, Priti Patel was saying £5 million a day. It's a vast amount of money that we are spending on looking after the people who cross the Channel illegally. And clearly, there is certainly a united desire within the Conservative Party as a whole, I would say, to deal with this, because this is one of the issues that comes up again and again and again on the doorstep. And remember Brexit, take control. And one of those things was take control of our borders. And as of yet, we seem to have failed completely to do so. So all eyes on Suella Braverman and what she's going to say. I mean, it sounds like a very strong plan, if she can get it through, to basically say if you come illegally, you have zero chance of getting asylum. Surely that would act as a massive deterrent if she can get it through. Of course, Priti Patel thought she could get the Rwanda plan through, although she was warned. So it will be interesting to see, and I think that is one of the issues that the Conservative Party is still relatively united on, although they do seem to be in vehement disagreements about lots of other things at the moment.
Yeah, indeed. Now, we've got loads coming your way here. We are just waiting for Suella Braverman to take to that stage around there. But I also understand that we can hear shortly from Stephen Wolfe, who will be joining us from back at base, though, in Paddington, who's going to be giving us his views on maybe some of the specifics as to this new migrant policy. So how is it going to be done without flouting international law? What does it mean now when it comes to foreign judges, foreign courts, and would say as well, getting involved in our own border policy? But just before that, Catherine, I believe that you've got another clip from Priti Patel for us, is that right?
Yes. So speaking earlier, let's have a little look at that, shall we?
So, my friends, I want to see our party regain its credibility by restoring its commitment to sound money and sustainable public spending. And what I mean by that is setting a ceiling for spending on public services, which is affordable today, tomorrow, but also for the foreseeable future. We have to be honest, we have become addicted to borrowing huge amounts today to fix problems.
OK, so Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary, who this time last year was giving a speech, essentially, on immigration, on illegal immigration, on the Channel, talking tough, and a lot of people would argue not a huge amount of results, especially when it came to the Rwanda plan, which, as far as I last checked, is pretty much quite literally yet to take off. It'll be interesting to see what Suella Braverman has to say. But I just wanted to play you again a clip of an interview I did right at the start of the show at 3 o'clock, because this is our immigration special here on GB News, with Councillor Andrew Johnson, who is the leader of the Conservative group, indeed the Conservative Council of the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. Some added relevance here. The MP in that area is Theresa May, former Home Secretary, former Prime Minister, and he was talking about the number of migrant hotels in his local area and the way that the government has gone about distributing them and communicating with local councils as well, the cost and indeed the burden on local taxpayers, loads of stuff. This was his views ahead of Suella Braverman's speech. Let's hear it.
See it as a bold plan, a decisive plan, and actually a plan the government's going to stick to. I mean, it's all very well to try and stem the flow of people crossing the Channel, but we've got to have a clear plan of what we do with those people who are already here. those people, for example, who are already in hotels in places such as Datchet, within Maidenhead, that's now starting to squeeze out the local tourist economy, and actually now starting to have significant cost increases, not only for my council, but for every council from Windsor right through to West Cumbria.
Yeah. OK, so that was Andrew Johnson there, who is the leader of the Conservative Council, which is the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. OK, so I am joined now by Natalie Elphicke MP, Conservative MP for Dover, who joins me right next to me. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Right, so we are just, supposedly anyway, minutes away from Suella Braverman giving her speech on illegal immigration in the Channel. What do you want her to say?
Well, I want her to say that she is going to be really firm on this issue, because as we approach the winter, we're expecting that there's more risk of death on the Channel, and it's absolutely vital that we get to grips with it. She said herself today that the small boat situation is in crisis, is an absolute mess, and we need absolutely to get a firm grip on this.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of people are saying we've heard all this before and we've had no action. What's different now?
Well, I think in addition to anything that she's going to be announcing today, we need to make sure that this is dealt with at the highest diplomatic levels with France, because at the end of the day, this is organised criminality on French shores, and people are leaving from France.
What if the French just say we don't care?
Well, I think that President Macron is absolutely key, and I hope that the Prime Minister takes this up with President Macron when she meets later in the week. Every opportunity she has with President Macron, she's got to raise it. We've got to get this sorted.
Well, we'll find out pretty quickly if he is a friend or foe, I suppose, if she raises it. How do you feel about things like people getting in touch all the time, tow the boats back?
Well, I think what we've seen is that the measures we've taken so far are not making that difference. We've got to make sure we shut down the route totally, and that means stopping the boats leaving, turning them around in the Channel, and making sure we have effective returns. That's got to be the focus.
Spent all day yesterday talking about a U-turn. I was sick and tired of it. Do you think they'll turn on this? Because there will be public backlash. Amnesty International, who have released a statement on this, dead against it, as you can imagine. Care for Calais, dead against any idea, frankly, of anything strict going on in the Channel whatsoever. Well, hang on a minute. Well, if there's public backlash on this from some very loud people, well, does the government U-turn? All of a sudden we've got an open border.
This is organised criminality through and through. We've got now Albanian gangs. They want to join the EU. They're a member of NATO. And we've got organised Albanian gangs coming across the Channel. This is organised criminality. We've got to be really clear about that. We are very compassionate, and we do a lot with refugees around the world. But this is organised criminality, and we've got to put a stop to it, and that starts in France.
Liz Truss has alluded to the idea she might want to do deals with other countries other than Rwanda. We've been blocked from Rwanda flights taking off because of our, well, frankly, the fact that we're at the mercy, some would say, of foreign judges in foreign courts. Does that need to stop?
We've got to make sure that we are able to do what the British people want, and they want us to stop this illegal immigration. They want us to also save lives in the Channel. You know, in my area of Dover, people want to make sure that we're not putting lives at risk in these small boats, but we've got to remember they are leaving from French shores. It's organised criminality. It's got to stop, and we've got to make sure we don't put lives at risk this winter. OK, and Liz Truss has spoken a lot about the organised criminality element of it. So from what I can gather, from what you're saying, is that we need to get rid of these criminal gangs. That might even mean doing things like, dare I say it, you know, sending our boys abroad, sending our SAS over somewhere, finding out where these Albanian gangs are and getting rid of them, because we're not getting rid of them in Italy anyway, are we? Well, I mean, the Albanian gangs are a great example of why this is such a problem, because they have stepped into what is this open border at the moment, and they are just plying their trade across the Channel. Now, what we know is the Albanian police are working in Calais and they're working in Dover. What I want to see is the French take our offer of working alongside them on the beaches and also have a Channel-wide security zone, so that wherever people are picked up, they're taken back to France.
If that means lobbing a lot more money at the French, would you still do it? Because, frankly, we've just been paying for nothing so far.
Well, we've done agreement after agreement, millions and millions of pounds of taxpayers' money with the French. And the bottom line is, it's their responsibility. They have responsibilities in relation to organised crime on their soil, same as we do on ours. We wouldn't just turn a blind eye where the city was up to no good. It's absolutely right that the French take this seriously. So this Friday, when President Macron and the Prime Minister meet, we've got to put this further up the agenda.
Do you realise, and I speak to a lot of people here, I'm sure you obviously do as well, of course you do, but I've spoken to a lot of people here who are seriously concerned now that Keir Starmer, it might even start to look like the person who could control immigration better than the Conservative Party is never a phrase I ever thought I'd say, but goodness gracious me, if whatever Suella Braverman has to say in there doesn't come off and doesn't work, then frankly, we're out of options. It does become a Labour problem, doesn't it?
I don't think there's any doubt that Labour are still in favour of open borders. They're still in favour of mass migration. I know that's not what the British people voted for. It's for the Conservative government to deliver on that. That means putting an end to the small boats crisis. It's absolutely dangerous there in the Channel, particularly in the winter. It's organised criminality and it needs to come to an end. But we also need to make sure that we're not soft on immigration, that we make sure that we're delivering on what we said to the British people when we left the EU.
Well, it's not just what's going on in the Channel. Quite a lot of people say, well, we need to get our legal immigration system right as well. Pressure on public services, pressure on school places, pressure on the housing crisis, all of this stuff. Are we strong enough when it comes to legal immigration? Do we need fewer legal immigrants as well as illegal immigrants?
Well, I think Priti Patel, as Home Secretary, did a lot of good work at changing what was a really dysfunctional and rubbish system. But there's much more to do. And I think we'll see under Suella Braverman a continuation of that strong policy in that organisation. But the bottom line is that I want to make sure that those immigration numbers overall come down. I think we've got plenty of people in our own country who we should be skilling up, training up, and making sure they have the opportunities here in the UK. If we want that growth, we want to make sure that growth and opportunity comes to the British people.
Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Good stuff, Dr. Elphick, there, the Conservative MP for Dover. What do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? Get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Yes, I was going to say don't forget. How could you forget? Because we keep banging on about it, because we're expecting it any second now. Suella Braverman is going to take to the stage just over that way there for a speech about how she's going to deal with illegal immigration. Currently, the chap you can see there is, of course, not Suella Braverman, it's Justice Secretary Brandon Lewis. He's speaking at the moment, almost like the warm-up act for the headliner that is Suella Braverman. The atmosphere is here generally building, I suppose, not quite as popping as it was for Kwasi Kwarteng, but there we go. Maybe people have gone home to avoid the rail strikes, which are unrelenting, but we'll have to wait and see about that. We're going to be going back to that stage where good old Brandon is chirping away, filling for a bit of time, as indeed I am, very, very shortly. But joining me on the show right now is the Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. It's the one, it's the only, Stephen Wolfe. Stephen, thank you very, very much. Now, we've heard it all before, haven't we? Let's talk tough. Let's talk tough about what's going on in the Channel, and absolutely naff all happened, Stephen. What's going on this time? Why should we be content, Stephen Wolfe, that anything's going to be done this time as we await to hear what we're expecting Suella Braverman to say, which is that nobody who lands here in a dinghy is going to be able to stay. Stephen, I can actually see you now. Good stuff. Crack on.
I think it's going to be the kind of last stand for the Conservatives to try and prove that they actually are tough on illegal immigration into this country. And the only way that I'm looking at this is that when we look at the numbers of those people who are actually granted what's called protection, what most people say is asylum, you can notice that asylum under the UN Convention on Refugees is actually very small. The largest bulk of those people who are accepted into this country are those who get humanitarian protection under the European Court of Human Rights, or indeed, we are just granting them our own protection discretionary. And that's also based on the European Courts of Human Rights. So the only way that I can see it is that she has to change the European Courts of Human Rights. Now, is she going to try and abolish it? Is she going to try and remove us from the Human Rights Act? I think that would be the right thing to do. And the strongest way of sending a message.
How can we do that? Just explain to me, Stephen, how we practically do that, because that appears to have been a barrier.
Well, the barrier is that we'd have to withdraw from the European Court of Human Rights protocols, of which we have signatures. And if we did that, that's sending a very powerful international message to our neighbours, particularly those across in France, that we're no longer going to accept the principles of European courts, as we saw with the Rwanda policy. Now, that's where we're going to see Amnesty International, Care for Calais, the whole immigration industry will come down like a ton of bricks upon this government, saying how bad that we actually are.
Yeah, they will. Now, I've got a question for you on that, because I'm worried about the whiff of unpopularity and nothing gets done anymore these days, the way the world has gone. But where do we send these people? It's all very well and good saying, you can't stay here, but they've ditched the documents in the Channel. They won't tell us where they're from. They might make up a cock and bull story about some persecution that they're fleeing to. Where do we send them?
Well, of course, Rwanda is still important. We know that the big court case is coming back in the middle of October, and then we'll find out definitively whether that will work. There certainly needs to be a dual system of one, obtaining further deals with other countries. As we know, for example, Denmark is looking at sending people to Rwanda too. But I think we also must look at alternatives in the short term. There is no doubt that we ought to tell the French that we're going to return these people, particularly who are outside of the European Court of Human Rights, and we can use the law of the sea to do so. So we can send them back to France. And now that's another international issue. The only question, Patrick, you and I know, is whether somebody like Liz Truss is going to be that strong a prime minister that she can face down Macron, face down the EU, face down the immigration industry. Is she strong enough?
This is the point, Stephen, because it does appear from where I'm sitting as well that it seems to be a British problem if people die in the Channel. Of course, it's a humanitarian problem. No one wants to see anyone pass away in the Channel whatsoever. But if we start towing boats back towards France, and then France starts towing them back towards us, and we engage in a, for want of a better phrase, a tug of war, right? Is it just a British problem if people die in the Channel? Should we be putting some of that onus on the French as well?
Well, there clearly is a French onus, and Macron suffered greatly when people died in the Channel. The only time that we saw Boris Johnson wake up to this particular issue. It would also give us an opportunity to use other alternative methods of taking them off, perhaps lifting them onto larger boats, obtaining cruise liners and taking them down to Rwanda that way. We have to have an alternative just in case it becomes a big issue like that. But what it is the whole of Europe is recognizing there is mass issues once again about illegal immigration. Italy and Greece are suffering the numbers once more. We saw what happened in Poland last year. We know how Hungary has built fences. We've seen what's happening in the Swedish Democrats succeeding in their policies. We've seen how the Italians have decided they've had enough. This is a massive issue in Europe, and everybody in the elitist elements of those governments have had their heads in the sand, and the people are saying enough is enough. Will Liz Truss be one of those at last?
We are waiting for Suella Braverman to take to the stage. She is a bit late, but you know what? What's a few minutes between phones? Because we've been waiting for years for someone to sort out what's been going on in the Channel, so what's a few more minutes? But in the meantime, I want to play you a clip, Stephen, of the previous Home Secretary, Suella Braverman's predecessor, Priti Patel, who spoke at a fringe event here in Birmingham, and also during her speech last year at the Conservative Party conference, where she was discussing in Manchester how she pledged to crack down on illegal migrant crossings. I just want to remind you, Stephen, of that and get a bit of reaction. Let's play it.
I make no apology for securing our borders and exploring all possible options to save lives by ending these horrific journeys, which is why right from the start Boris and I have worked intensively with every institution with the responsibility to protect our borders. Border Force, the police, the National Crime Agency, maritime experts, and yes, the military, to deliver operational solutions, including new sea tactics, which we are working to implement to turn back the boats.
All right, Stephen, turning back the boats didn't work, trying to deal with the French didn't work, trying to bring in the Navy didn't work, trying to extend the border force didn't work. Why don't we send the SAS in to kill the people smuggling gangs?
Well, you can imagine that there'll be a lot of support for that particular point of view, Patrick, across the country. And I think if they did do that, again, another international issue. But the reality is, Patrick, they failed. They failed when you see on Dungeness, as those illegal migrants arrive on the beaches, care for Calais running down with mobile phones and bags of support and clothes for those migrants, and the police standing back and doing absolutely nothing whatsoever. Often, I am told that you can see taxis arriving, waiting for them to actually get into them and disappear. That's where we failed on the police. We failed on the boats as well, because now we know through government lawyers that the moment we pick them up in the ocean, in the sea, then our new laws, the immigration law that Priti Patel put through, can't be used to return these people. So we failed there as well. We failed with the Navy, who said that they wouldn't return them because their lawyers said they'd be at risk of being charged with manslaughter if someone died. So the whole system has failed. Yeah. Suella Braverman is a lawyer, like myself. She knows some of the big difficulties. She has to create the legal framework first. She has to have a strong political backers in terms of the political parties within the Conservatives and their leadership to be able to sustain it. Otherwise, this will be a failure too.
All right, Stephen. Thank you very much. Stephen Wolfe, of course, who is an expert when it comes to immigration and as well going on to economic prosperity. Just a quick word to say as well, I've been reliably informed that indeed killing the people smuggling gangs is not the only option. We could also maybe just arrest them and bring them to justice peacefully, and it's important to say that, of course it is. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch via the emails, gbviews at gbnews.uk, just saying there's a multitude of different options. gbviews at gbnews.uk. I want to go to those emails very, very shortly, if I can, to hear what you've all been saying when it comes to the preview, of course, to Suella Braverman's big speech that we're waiting to hear here at Conservative Party conference in Birmingham. Terry has been on. Terry says, how much per head does it cost to support immigrants? I'm assuming you mean illegal immigrants here. As a pensioner, I know that I make a bit of a garbled one this, I'm afraid. I know what I have to live on and pay for my energy. He says that illegal immigrants get free housing and have no worries about keeping warm, etc. A couple of issues just coming through to me there on the inbox, so I'm going to just ignore those. I'm going to go to someone who's sitting right next to me here, much safer bet, a much safer pair of hands. It's Darren McCaffrey, our political editor. Right, Darren, it's all about to kick off here with Suella Braverman, allegedly, although I'm still waiting patiently.
Yeah, we're still waiting. I think what's really fascinating today is we've had a whole series of stuff, essentially, where you've got Prime Minister and the Chancellor who essentially seem to suggest that we're going to get this big announcement in the OBR forecast on the 23rd of November, even though their advisors were briefing the media yesterday that it was going to be brought forward. Then today, in addition to that, you've got kind of the breakdown of discipline, if you like. So you have Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, who's about to, as you say, speak on stage, saying that essentially there's been an attempted coup against the government already. You've got Robert Buckland, who's the Welsh Secretary, telling people like Michael Gove they need to shut up. And it's just a sign that the Tories have been in Birmingham for a couple of days, and the infighting that had been underground is very much now in the fringes and in the centre.
Can I ask how many of them have actually been here? Because we're hearing unsubstantiated rumours at this particular stage, even as many as potentially 2/3 of Tory MPs haven't bothered to turn up.
You can tell. You just walk around, you hardly see lots of them. I mean, there's loads of high-profile people, Rishi Sunak, Sajid Javid, loads of people who are not here. And also, I mean, frankly, the ones that are here are all leaving today because there's a train strike tomorrow. You often wonder who Liz is going to be speaking to, the Prime Minister's going to be speaking to in the hall tomorrow.
Is there a chance that Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, the new leader of the Conservative Party, will potentially be speaking to a relatively empty hall?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, the hall this year has got smaller. It's normally in a big hall, the Symphony Hall just over there, but it's actually to our right in a smaller hall. I'm sure the room will still be full. But, this is a party. It's really extraordinary, actually. Talking to people from all wings of this party, and there is an almost a quiet expectation now that this is over, that the time in government is coming to an end. Quite extraordinary. I just spoke to someone a little earlier on who said this reminded him of 1995, that this felt that there was this big sea change, that at the moment, with the current leadership, there was no real sense that they could turn things around. Now, I actually happen to disagree with that. I think there is a path for Liz Truss, actually, to hold on to power and to win maybe in 2024. I think expectations about the economy are pretty low. Things might not be that bad, actually. Interest rates might not hit 6.5%.
Well, this is it, isn't it?
Inflation might be curbed. We might not have a very deep recession. And we could well see growth in 2024. And the Prime Minister's argument then might be, you know what, my plan is working, stick with it. People might not be terribly enamored with Keir Starmer. So I think there is a path. But genuinely, and I really mean this, the mood here is on the floor. I mean, it really is on the floor.
Yeah, OK, fair enough. I suppose another big issue, right, you've got the money in people's pockets. That's always a huge issue at any general election, or just generally, really. And you've also got immigration, which is what we're apparently awaiting for Suella Braverman to say. And if they get this right, apparently, there we go, we've waited long enough. Home Secretary Suella Braverman is now, I believe, at the stage, so we can take it now. Suella Braverman addressing party members.
Keeping the British people safe and securing our borders are the highest duties of state. Our Prime Minister understands those duties, and so do I. We stand for the law-abiding majority of Britons. And in doing so, I draw on a long tradition of Conservative Home Secretaries who were willing to challenge failing orthodoxy. They refused to accept defeat. Michael Howard, on his first day as Home Secretary, was told that there was nothing that he could do about the inevitable rise of crime. He disagreed, and crime fell dramatically. They said that Theresa May couldn't deport Abu Qatada, the Islamist extremist. But, and despite setbacks along the way, she made it happen. Priti Patel negotiated a groundbreaking deal with our partners in Rwanda to bring forward a new solution for the challenge of illegal migration, providing protection in Rwanda for those that need it, whilst breaking the business model of people smugglers. I'm grateful to Priti and Boris for the foundations that they laid. Serious violent crime has fallen, as has overall crime, excluding fraud and online theft. And we are well on the way to 20,000 additional police officers. But a Home Secretary can never be complacent, and some things still need fixing. I'm pleased to be working with a brilliant team of ministers who I'm so pleased to see with us today. Tom Tugendhat, Tom Pursglove, Jeremy Quinn, Mims Davies and Lord Andrew Sharp, supported by our excellent PPSs, Gareth Davies and Sean Bailey. They all bring talent and expertise to the Home Office. Now, the Prime Minister and I want to see homicide, serious violence and neighbourhood crime fall by 20%. Some of our most committed and courageous people serve in the police. In Belfast, last week, I joined police leaders to pay tribute to those officers who have died in action. Their ultimate sacrifice is one for which we owe a huge debt of gratitude. So yes, I'm immensely proud of our police. Now, many on the left, they want to defund the police. Well, I say to the militants, I say to the anarchists and the extremists, no, I will always back our police men and women. That's what being on the side of the law-abiding majority means. But we also need to be frank when things go wrong. Some police officers have fallen devastatingly short of the standards expected. We need to get back to common sense policing, empowering the police to tackle the issues facing the public, not policing pronouns on Twitter or non-crime. Not policing non-crime hate incidents. That's why I'm very pleased to see that Greater Manchester Police, Hampshire, Bedfordshire, Northamptonshire and the Metropolitan Police have all promised now to visit the scene of every burglary. But the law-abiding majority expect every force to investigate every neighbourhood crime, and so do I. Drugs, car theft, vandalism, and antisocial behaviour cannot be ignored. Perhaps the most unsettling and unspeakable crime of all is rape. Now, as an MP and as the Attorney General, I've already seen firsthand how the system needs to do better. I can't change things overnight, but I will not accept the status quo. Now, policing is a public service and must be accountable to you, the public. That's why it's right that we publish league tables that show how well every force in England and Wales is doing in their fight against crime. You all have the right to know, and greater transparency will drive up standards. Now, the modern world inevitably brings new challenges. Our National Security Bill will ensure that law enforcement and intelligence agencies have the tools that they need to stay ahead of the country's ever more sophisticated adversaries. Yet everything starts from getting the basics right. We need common sense policing, unashamedly, unapologetically, on the side of the law-abiding majority. And that means that the mob needs to be stopped. The police must have all the powers that they need to stop the protesters who use guerrilla tactics and bring chaos and misery to the law-abiding majority. It's not a human right to vandalise property. It's not my freedom of expression to protest violently. No, you can't just start a riot or glue yourself to the roads and get away with it. Yes, friends, as Attorney General, I had to go to court to get some of these simple truths established. The judges agreed with me last week in the Court of Appeal in the Colston statue case. And that's why our Public Order Bill will empower our police to stop this nuisance. So whether you're Just Stop Oil or Insulate Britain or Extinction Rebellion, you cross a line when you break the law, and that's why we'll keep putting you behind bars. Now, it's very easy to say that the culture wars are a distraction. But make no mistake, the left are attacking our profound elemental values, wanting to replace them with the poison of identity politics. And when this poison seeps into the public sphere, it distracts our public servants from doing their real job. That philosophy dominates the Labour Party, whatever Sir Keir Starmer pretends. And that's why it's not only wrong for the police to take the knee, it is wrong for them to join in with political demonstrations. It is wrong for biologically male police officers to strip search female suspects. And it's not just that pandering to identity politics is a huge waste of time. They need to stick to catching the bad guys. Now, those who dismiss political correctness as a conservative obsession, I say this. I say visit Rochdale, visit Telford. The grooming gang scandal is a stain on this country, and it's what happens when political correctness becomes more important than criminal justice. More PCs, less PC. Now, my other mission is to control our borders. Firstly, legal migration. Now, I backed Brexit because I wanted Britain to have control over our migration and to cut overall numbers. Brexit was meant to give us a say on how we determine our own migration policy. We should use our newfound control to deliver the kind of migration that grows our economy. For example, that helps projects that have stalled or builds friendships and relationships with our allies. But the truth is, parts of our system aren't delivering. We need to end the abuse of the rules, and we need to cut down on those numbers that aren't meeting the needs of our economy. And we mustn't forget how to do things for ourselves. There is absolutely no reason why we can't train up enough of our own HGV drivers or butchers or fruit pickers. The way we build a high-skilled, high-wage economy is by encouraging business to invest in capital and domestic labour, not relying wholly on low-skilled foreign workers. Now, this just isn't just about policy or economics for me. It's intensely personal. My parents came to this country in the 1960s from Kenya and Mauritius. They loved Britain from afar as children of the Commonwealth. It was Britain that offered them security and opportunity as young adults. I'm not embarrassed to say that I love Britain. No Conservative is. It's not racist for anyone, ethnic minority or otherwise, to want to control our borders. It's not bigoted to say that we have too many asylum seekers who are abusing the system. It's not xenophobic to say that mass and rapid migration places pressure on housing, public services, and community relations. I reject the left's argument that it is hypocritical for someone from an ethnic minority to tell these truths. My parents came here through legal and controlled migration. They spoke the language. They threw themselves into the community. They embraced British values. When they arrived, they signed up to be part of our shared project because the United Kingdom meant something distinct. Integration was part of the quid pro quo. Now, that didn't mean abandoning their heritage, but it did mean adopting British identity, an identity of which we should all be proud. This is the best place on earth to come and live in, but I fear that we are losing sight of the core values and the culture that made it so. The unexamined drive towards multiculturalism as an end in itself, combined with the corrosive aspects of identity politics, has led us astray. I saw this when I went to Leicester recently, a melting pot of cultures and a beacon of religious harmony. But even there, riots and civil disorder have taken place because of failures to integrate large numbers of newcomers. Such conflict has no place in the UK. Or when we look at the Prevent scheme, we see how cultural tensions within communities are not being handled well enough. The murderer of our much missed dear friend, Sir David Amess, had been referred to Prevent, but it couldn't stop him. We cannot, as a people, be cowed into fear by vocal minorities who attempt to undermine our common sense instincts. And as Home Secretary, I will make sure that Prevent is fit for purpose. The law-abiding majority deserve nothing less. And lastly, we've got to stop the boats crossing the Channel. This has gone on for far too long. But I have to be straight with you. There are no quick fixes, and the problem is chronic. Organised criminal gangs are selling a lie to thousands of people. Many are drowning in the Channel. Many are leaving a safe country like France and abusing our asylum system. So what's our plan? Firstly, our work with the French has prevented about half of all the crossings. Now, I know that that alone will not work. So I will work closely with the French to get more out of our partnership, both on the French coastline and further upstream against the organised criminal gangs. Secondly, we need to find a way to make the Rwanda scheme work. Thirdly, we need to do more to get asylum seekers out of hotels, currently costing the British taxpayer £5 million a day. And fourth, we cannot allow a foreign court to undermine the sovereignty of our borders. For a few months ago, the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg did just that. By a closed process with an unnamed judge and without any representation by the UK, a European court overrode our Supreme Court. And as a result, our first flight to Rwanda was grounded. We need to take back control. But friends, I need to be honest with you. The Strasbourg Court is not the only problem. Now, everyone agrees that we must fight the evil of modern slavery. I'm immensely proud of this country's global leadership in protecting genuine victims. But the hard truth is that our modern slavery laws are being abused by people gaming the system. We've seen a 450% increase in modern slavery claims since 2014. Today, the largest group of small boats migrants are from Albania, a safe country. Many of them claim to be trafficked as modern slaves. That's despite them having paid thousands of pounds to come here or having willingly taken a dangerous journey on the Channel. The truth is that many of them are not modern slaves, and their claims of being trafficked are lies. And it's not just illegal migrants. Since entering the Home Office, I have seen egregious examples of convicted paedophiles and rapists trying to game the system, making last-minute claims of modern slavery to block their removal from the country. Some have even gone on to commit further crimes in the interim. In one case, a convicted sex offender from South Africa had spent a year in prison. He was about to be deported from the United Kingdom, and lo and behold, he made a claim of modern slavery. Our removal was stalled, And in this time, he went on to commit a further rape. He's now behind bars, but when he's released, well, it's all so terribly predictable. In another case, a paedophile from Pakistan received 10 years in prison, but at the end of his prison sentence, he put in a spurious claim to be a modern slave. And even when he got through that process, he made a second claim, which blocked his removal. We simply cannot go on like this. We need to make sure that our system strikes the right balance. Our laws need to be resilient against abuse, whilst at the same time ensuring that we help those in genuine need. We've got a proud history of offering sanctuary to those in need, from supporting the thousands of BNOs fleeing persecution in Hong Kong, to welcoming nearly 20,000 Afghan nationals fleeing war and terror, to offering immediate refuge to thousands of Ukrainians fleeing Putin's barbarism. The UK and this Conservative government has always been there to hold out the hand of hope to those who need it most. But the law simply isn't working. It isn't working in the interests of the British people or people who need our help the most. Our laws are being abused. Abused by people smugglers and criminals peddling false promises. Abused by people making multiple, meritless and last-minute claims. Abused by tactics from specialist, small boat-chasing law firms. This cannot continue. So, Conference, I will commit to you today that I will look to bring forward legislation to make it clear that the only route to the United Kingdom is through a safe and legal route. And that's so that we can help support those who need our help the most, including women and girls. So if you deliberately enter the United Kingdom illegally from a safe country, you should be swiftly returned to your home country or relocated to Rwanda. That is where your asylum claim will be considered. UK policy on illegal migration should not be derailed by abuse of our modern slavery laws, Labour's Human Rights Act, or orders of the Strasbourg Court. And we will always, of course, work within the bounds of international law, but we cannot allow this abuse of our system to continue. And of course, at the same time, we need to stamp out illegal working practices. We already have some of the toughest penalties for those not playing by our rules, but we will redouble our efforts to go after them. But I need to be straight with you, Conference. This will not be easy. I cannot promise you a solution immediately. We've all heard pledges and promises, but this problem is complex and entrenched. And there are many forces working against us. The Labour Party will try to stop this. The Lib Dem will go bananas. The Guardian will have a meltdown. As for the lawyers, don't get me started on the lawyers. And I'm a recovering lawyer. But what I can pledge to you is my total and undeniable and unfettered and unconditional commitment to doing whatever it takes. And despite those obstacles, I won't give up on you, and I won't give up on the British people. very kind of you. I hadn't actually finished. My goodness. Now, if I don't get a standing ovation at the end, what do I make of that? Ladies and gentlemen, friends, conference, the time for words is over. Now is the time for action. It's time to put the will of the hard-working, patriotic majority at the heart of all we do. It's time for the police to stop virtue signalling and start catching robbers and burglars. It's time to tackle the small boats, no ifs, no buts. Friends, it's time for common sense. I stand ready to serve you. I stand ready to deliver. The time is ours. The time is now. Thank you, conference.
Great big standing ovations there for the new Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. One of them, let's be honest, because people thought she'd finished, which she rather quick-wittedly said, I haven't yet, and she tossed a little bit more red meat into the Birmingham auditorium here. I am joined by GBNews political editor Darren McCaffrey. I'm also joined by the one and only Andrew Pearce as well. I've spoken to Darren a lot, you've been sitting here, but I'm going to start with you, Andrew. Look, lots to get stuck into here. Boats, she said there's no quick fixes in the channel. The problem is chronic. She wants to work more with the French. She did also say we need to find a way to make it work with European courts. We need to find a way to get migrants out of hotels. We need to find a way to stop foreign courts overruling us when it comes to deporting people like paedophiles and rapists. And she wants to stop the police virtue signalling. Good grief, where do you start?
Well, it's great. And if she delivers on half of that, that would be huge progress, because I'm afraid previous Home Secretaries have talked the talk. Priti Patel, who I was a great fan of and a great admirer of, but she didn't deliver, did she? And I think that what's going on the Channel is one of the biggest political issues for this government. Huge issue, particularly in red wall seats. I talk to Tory MPs all the time that they've got to get a grip of it. She's talking, isn't she, about stopping people crossing the Channel, claiming asylum. So that'll trigger a huge fight with the lawyers, but she says she's up for the fight.
I'm really sorry about this, Darren, really sorry.
No, I was just going to say there's more red meat in that speech than in Argentinian restaurants.
Yeah, well,
absolutely.
Good.
OK, Foreign Secretary James Cleverly now, ladies and gentlemen. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly is now taken to the stage here at Conservative Party conference. Let's have it.
Because organising a conference is a mammoth undertaking. And a big thank you to our staff, our volunteers, and of course a huge thank you to you, our party members. I loved being party chairman. I really did. I got a chance to work with you all, I got a chance to work with Ben, my co-chairman, and I got to work alongside Boris. And if I remember rightly, we did okay, didn't we? We got an 80-seat majority. We had a great team of MPs elected from all over our country, and with Boris's leadership, we delivered Brexit. He got us through COVID. And of course, he led the world in our support for Ukraine. It's a legacy that he should be proud of, and I was proud to serve under him. And it's a legacy that I know Liz Truss will build upon. And I've seen her take bold action when she was Foreign Secretary. Her steadfast support for Ukraine and the way she stood up to Russia. Her passion. Her passion for the defence of our union and her determination to promote democracy and freedom around the world. And as Prime Minister, she is being bold now, helping with energy bills, ensuring that you can see a doctor promptly, reducing the taxes paid by ordinary, hard-working people across the country. I backed her from the start, and I know that I made the right choice. I am the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. I have to confess, it still sounds a little strange coming out of my mouth, but it is an honour, a genuine honour, to be the face and voice of our country overseas. Okay, yeah, why not? I'm the UK's sales guy. And I like to think I'm pretty good at sales. I mean, I hope so. For most of my adult life, that's what paid the bills. But I know that however good a salesperson I aspire to be, the greatest salesperson the UK ever had was Her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth. She was our greatest diplomat, our greatest advocate, our greatest champion. She genuinely was Elizabeth the Great. And I've now also had the honour of meeting King Charles. And I know he will work tirelessly to continue the work that she did and be our new great ambassador. During the funeral week of Her late Majesty, I was reminded of the standing that our country has in the world. And when I travel on behalf of our country, I'm lucky enough to see us, to see the UK as others see us. And I can tell you, the view of here from over there is really, really good. It's not a terribly fashionable thing to be proud of your country, but I am, so sue me. My mother chose to make this country her home. She was a young woman from Sierra Leone who adored this country then, just as I adore this country now. Indeed, I am from immigrant stock on both sides of my family. As I say, my mother came here from Sierra Leone in 1966, and my dad's family came here from Normandy in 1066. Look, there will always be people that talk down our country. They will belittle our achievements. They will underestimate our standing. Those self-loathing keyboard warriors who hate our country's every success and pray for bad news. Those are the kind of people who aren't happy until they're unhappy. They're the kind of people who want to stand on the sidelines, never contributing, only moaning and bleating. But that isn't us. That isn't this party. That isn't this government. That isn't this country. We aren't commentators watching on the sidelines saying, oh, I wouldn't have done it like that. We are players on the pitch. We make a difference. We promote our values. We compete on the world stage for the things that we know to be right. We believe in freedom. We believe in the rule of law. And we believe that an aggressor cannot invade its neighbour with impunity. And that conference is why we stand shoulder to shoulder with those brave Ukrainians defending their homeland. And Britain has to have the strategic endurance